Welcome to Manhwa Recaps, spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. Huge shout out and special thanks to the channel members. The series starts in the year 666 AD, and tells us that the great magister Yun Gaesomun, who was the guardian god of Gali, died. His death brought a great division to Gali, and Gali no longer had the means to stop the 100,000 strong army of the Tang dynasty. 2 years later, we see a public execution while prisoners helplessly watch their loved ones get beheaded. The Tang dynasty laughs, saying that this is what the Gaulists deserve, and we see them bring up a little kid, and the executioner looks over at the general and smiles, as the little kid is begging for his life. The executioner tells him to blame his misfortune on being born in the wrong country. As he goes to swing down though, an arrow flies from the side, killing him. The boy is surprised, and the general is as well because the shot came from far away. As the Gali soldiers start descending down the hill with their cavalry and foot soldiers, the Tang recognize their flag because there is a three-legged crow on it, and we learn that the cavalry is named the Black Armored Demon Cavalry. As they get close to the Tang soldiers, the general tells his men not to panic. They must be delusional to think they can face the great 100,000 strong army with a mere 3,000 soldiers, and they are no match for them. The Gali general is there as well. The Gali general slashes the Tang general through in a single strike, instantly demoralizing the Tang army, but he doesn't stop there, and as he continues charging forward, he beheads even more of them. They are completely stunned, locked in fear, and his men quickly pursue from behind. They do their best to fend them off, but the Tang just get slaughtered, and it's a completely one-sided fight from the Gaulists. Then they free the prisoners. One of the men who is still alive says those cliché lines about revenge, but he just gets his head cut off. It rolls along the floor before hitting another soldier's foot, but that same man is being impaled by the general. He continues to glare down at his enemies before more foot soldiers and cavalry arrive. He turns seeing them, and tells his men to go to the Pyongyang fortress and escort the civilians. He then tells his men to retreat to the fortress, and that Buru and Uru will block the enemy's pursuit, and he as well will clear a path for them to retreat from. He charges straight into the front lines as the civilians quickly run behind him with the rest of the cavalry. He is single-handedly mowing them down, creating a path for them, splitting them like he was Moses type shit. The citizens do their best to keep up with them, and eventually after they get through the main army, his cavalry units start pressing them so they can't chase after them. A man then asks the general to let him fight too, as he wants to protect his family with his own hands. It's the father of the boy who was about to be executed, but the boy says that he'll fight instead. The general glares at him, and the boy tells him he will fight. It continues, and finally the general agrees, asking if he can ride a horse. If he cannot ride, then he cannot fight. The boy realizes that he can't, and the general tells his men to bring him a horse, as the father is now going to fight. His father tells him that he must go, and protect his family. The general says that they need to gather the elderly, children, and wounded, and head to Pyongyang fortress. As the boy runs off, he tells his father that he will protect their family, so he must come back alive. As we see the 100,000 strong army charging straight at them, the general raises his spear, telling his men not to let a single one escape. They tap their spears on the ground in unison, creating an echo throughout the battlefield, and they start screaming. The citizens finally make it to the Pyongyang fortress, and bang on the door, and they beg that they let them enter. The men atop the wall look down at them, but do their best to ignore their gazes, as the citizens are screaming, begging that they open the gates. The emperor starts to squeeze his armrest, and looks pissed. He asks his guard captain if there is truly no way. His name is Emperor Bojang. The guard captain begs for him to kill him, and says the enemy numbers are too great. Bojang laughs, and then eventually turns into him crying. The guard captain says that the emperor must escape before the encirclement tightens. Bojang is disappointed that he failed his lineage, and says that even if he escapes, there is nowhere for him to go. The guard captain says they prepared a ship, and he must sail south to gather his forces, and rebuild. The emperor sighs, and he says that even if they do gather their forces, who will fight? The guard captain reminds him that the great Saja Go Jinshin is still here. Bojang's eyes instantly light up with hope, and he realizes that he is right. He tells the captain of the guard to grant him one request. He listens, as we can't hear what he is saying, but he nods his head, and we understand because of the fact that one of his wives brings forth her child. Some time later, we see the father of the boy dead on the floor, and the General Jinshin stares down at him, saying that his death will be remembered by his son. The next wave of enemies appears over the crest of the hill, and both Buru and Uru start shit-talking each other, making a bet on who can kill more. Hui as well tells him that the tide of battle has already turned. The General Jinshin says that it is going to be difficult to ride forward from now on. Uru and Uru say that they should all have a contest to see who can kill more, and the loser has to go pluck the beard of the great King Yama. Jinshin says a contest doesn't sound bad, and as his men smile, he says that shit actually sounds fun. Everybody starts to laugh, and it starts to echo across the battlefield. Hui smiles because the mood has been lifted, and everybody has already accepted that this will be where they die. Hui looks over at Jinshin, saying that this final battlefield should be quite thrilling. Jinshin slowly raises his spear into the air, and everybody locks in, and Jinshin says that not a single one shall set foot in Pyongyang Fortress. Back at the city gates, the door slowly opens, and the captain of the guard begins to walk out. Jinshin turns seeing him, and he says that this command is for Jinshin as well as everybody else, that they need to retreat, and this is a direct order from their majesty. They start doing so, abandoning their fortress. Uru and Uru both wonder what will happen because if they leave the fortress, it will be in danger, but say that the emperor must have a plan. Currently all they know from the guard captain is that they have to move to the port, get on the ships, and await further orders. Hui says that it seems that the emperor intends to sail south, and regroup his forces. As they are walking past, something catches Jinshin's eyes, and he sees a noble's carriage on the ground. Uru says that he has ruined their country, and tried fleeing. That sure is pathetic. Uru says that he wished he could have put a hole in his skull himself. A man then approaches them really panicked, and tells Jinshin that there is a problem. A Tang cavalry force of 500 is pursuing them from the fortress. It seems to be pursuing a carriage that left the fortress. Hui says that another noble is fleeing, and the man says that's not it. The carriage currently has the emperor's flag flying on it. The guard captain and his men are doing their best to protect it, saying that they need to stay close to the carriage, and they can't allow anyone through. The other force starts to get close to them. One of the men says that he will buy them some time. The guard captain says that's nonsense, but the man calls for the rear guard, and 10 people to follow him. He yells out for the vice captain, but he ignores him, and smiles saying that he must protect His Highness the Crown Prince, and charges straight into the Tang forces. As they charge in, the leader of the enemy cavalry stabs him straight through the throat, and the vice captain grits his teeth, but it's too much, as he gets thrown off of his horse, and impaled into the ground. His men are made light work of, and they quickly continue pursuing the carriage. As they do so, the guard captain looks back, seeing how the vice captain fell instantly, but when he looks back forward, an arrow is flying right by his face. It's not aimed at him though, as it goes straight over his shoulder, hitting the leader of the cavalry behind, causing him to fall off of his horse. The guard captain looks forward to see where it came from, and spots Jinshin's flag, and starts to cry tears of joy, as he and his men are charging straight towards them, going past to allow the carriage to get to the port. As they are riding past one another, he and Jinshin exchange greetings, but that's about it, as they both have their own duty to fulfill. Jinshin to buy time, and the guard captain to escort the crown prince. Jinshin tells his men that they must annihilate all of the enemies before them. They scream, and charge straight in, and it turns to a full-on bloodbath. 2 of the Tang enemies leap at Hui, but get one arrow through both of their skulls, and we see it was none other than Uru, who says that he's up 2 kills right now. Uru tightens the grip on his axe before cleaving through a man and his horse in one, saying that he's only got one more to catch up. As they continue, Jinshin then asks the guard captain if the emperor is in the carriage. He says no. Jinshin asks who's inside then, so the guard captain tells him that it's the crown prince. He then bows his head to Jinshin, who's just taken aback because he didn't even know of it, but since the crown prince is here and the emperor is not, it must mean that he's dead. Some time later, after they fend off the cavalry, Jinshin's regrouped with the main forces. As everybody's going to the port together, Jinshin recalls him asking the guard captain if this is truly a decree from His Majesty. The guard captain said yes. His Majesty ordered them to escort the young emperor by ship to a safe location. Jinshin is still a bit curious as to if it really is the emperor's order. Because like I mentioned before, if it is, it means the emperor is dead. They continue as the night passes and the morning is almost upon them. They've still got a ways to go and Hui says they'll arrive there at sunrise. A man then calls out for Jinshin saying the enemy is here. They look down the hill seeing the enemy forces traveling below them. Uru and Buru start hyping everybody up and Jinshin gives everybody the order to follow him. Jinshin orders the cavalry to follow him and the rest to protect the young emperor. As they are now splitting up into groups, Jinshin and the boys are heading down the mountain to meet the Tang forces. Jinshin and the rest line up and he orders Uru to fire at once. As the enemies get closer and closer, Uru draws back his bow as the rest of his unit does and he says they are aiming for 2 per arrow. Uru shoots the first before their arrows start to blot out the sky like that scene from 300. Then the Tang forces start eating that shit, falling over one after the other. Jinshin takes it as his chance to charge in and disrupt the enemy flow. While they are disoriented, he pivots to the side as the men follow behind him. This whole fight sequence really reminds me of Kingdom. If you guys haven't read it, go give it a read. Jinshin cuts the head off of one of the enemies and the true Tang general watches from a nearby plateau, biding his time until they are tired. Meanwhile, in the carriage, the young crown prince is being lulled to sleep, before an arrow flies in through the roof, almost colliding them. She screams out in a panic which makes the young emperor start crying too. Now that the Tang forces are also at the coastline, the shield bearers are ordered to move to the front and block the arrows. As they walk up, they do so. The Tangs fire their arrows, but the shield wall is holding sturdy. The Tang forces then start running in on foot, and the spearmen get ready for the advance. A man then yells, saying that they will hold them back until the young emperor is safely aboard the ship. They need to endure until the great envoy arrives. His name is Gai Wongsum. The Tang forces start to get closer, but he charges straight in. The main forces of the Tang are now finally upon Jacqueline the rest, and the man introduces himself as Wei Chung Yun, the true guard general of the Tang Empire. Jinshin stares at him and the man says that if he surrenders now, he will personally request that His Imperial Majesty grant him the honor of fighting under him for the Tang Empire. As he nods his head, Chung Yun starts to laugh loudly. He says a wise choice, and he shall make him his right hand before an arrow flies in, piercing his skull. As that is why Jinshin truly nodded, it was for Uru to shoot, and he even pierced the man behind. Chung Yun instantly falls limp. Uru and Buru start shit talking, them asking if they only fight with their mouths. They quickly surround their general, and Jinshin tells Hui to go. Hui grabs his axe, telling all the troops to heed his call and charge. They start throwing their axes forward, annihilating the enemies in front of them. One of the soldiers who is laying on the floor after an axe caught him in the chest looks up only to see a horse as it stomps on his skull, popping that shit like a watermelon. The fight continues, but back at the port we see that Wongsum and the rest have also held off on their end. Wongsum is gassed out, but hears the sound of horses and wonders if it's the enemies or allies. He spots Jinshin and tells his men that the great envoy is finally here. Everybody starts cheering, and Jinshin yells, telling them that the Tang troops are behind and they need to board the ship quickly and move like their feet are on fire. They quickly do so, and by the time the Tang forces arrive at the beach it's too late as they've already started sailing away. They take their fleet and start to cross the ocean, and Jinshin finally for the first time gets to meet the crown prince. He stares down at him, asking what his name is. The guard captain says that His Majesty Yulji named him Yulji. Jinshin asks what His Majesty's next command was, and the guard captain stares at him before remaining silent. Jinshin then asks him where His Majesty is. The guard captain reaches into his armor and pulls out a note, saying that His Majesty gave this to be delivered. Jinshin understands that it's exactly what he thought, and hands the Yulji off as he starts to open it. The letter says that he gives his final command to his younger brother to take this child and the remaining survivors and go far, far away and live a peaceful life. He's exhausted from the war. And Yolye says that this is an elder brother's last request to his little brother, and he hopes that he can respect it. Jinshin's just pissed. Saying that a man he could never bring himself to call brother, now calls himself as such and tells him to flee. He asks what happened to Pyongyang Fortress. The guard captain once more doesn't answer, and Jinshin yells asking for him to speak. But instead he drops to his knees begging to be killed. Jinshin realizes what this implies. As the guard captain starts crying, the realization sets in for Jinshin that just like his brother, being the last lineage of the Gaulis, they have failed their ancestors who held this place for 900 years and he couldn't protect them. The waters then start to get hella violent, causing everybody to stumble all around the ship. Jinshin bumps into the railing and the crown prince start crying really loudly. The water gets more and more violent with every passing second and there's even a tint of red in it which is pretty bizarre. Soon, a storm starts to appear and the waves get ever more violent. This continues as everybody's holding on for dear life while the ship is getting tossed around by the waves. Everybody's tying ropes around their waists so they don't fall off. But it looks like some of the ships are capsizing. The ship captain yells for Jinshin and he asks what it is. Boat dude says they need to turn the ship around. He's lived his whole life on the sea but he's never seen waves like this. As what they are riding into is a massive wall and if they keep going they'll all be dead. Jinshin stares forward and the man tells him to quickly turn the boat around but Jinshin takes one look at his nephew's smile and says at this point there's no path left for them to return to. Lightning then strikes nearby, and he tells his men to push through the waves as this is His Majesty Ilya's will. And the Battle of the Gali Navy, he points his blade at the giant wall and tells his men to break straight through it as they have no other option. They start literally fighting the wall as waterspouts begin forming all around them. They all start clashing with it finally and are getting sucked into the massive wall itself until we see a bright blue light and it starts to expand until everything goes white. Jinshin then eventually opens his eyes wondering how his nephew is, and while he's panting he slowly stands back up and hears his nephew laughing and waving. Jinshin looks down confused, and even the man from before asks what happened as the mainland should still be far away. Buru says that the typhoon is already gone and it got quiet all of a sudden, but it was a relief. And he says that if they can see land they should hurry and dock, asking why he's standing there like that, wondering if he has an arrow in his head. The man says that it's just that over there, it's odd. Buru says the view is nice and the land is huge, but no matter where he looks, and it's crazy because even if he turns around there's land everywhere. But as he's doing a second look he asks when the sea got this narrow to begin with because they are now in a lake. Jinshin asks how this is possible. Buru starts choking boat dude asking if he's insane if they really just circled around inside a lake for days. Hui tells him to quiet down. Buru though is just pissed asking how he is so calm when the captain is an idiot. And Hui instead just asks Jinshin what they should do. Jinshin says this is clearly a lake and they set out from the open sea. Whatever happened they must be far from where they began, which means this is a safe place. Hui nods, telling the captain to order the fleet to land, and he yells, doing so. Jinshin just wonders where the hell they've ended up. They dock their boats and start setting up camps. Jinshin tells both Buru and Uru to lead the soldiers and scout the surroundings, as they should use this area to prepare for any possible ambush and form battle lines around this location. Hui says that he understands. Jinshin tells the captain and the guards to report the current personnel. He says understood, and everybody starts going to do their task. He oversees them making sure they are doing it properly. Until he hears his nephew crying. He enters the tent wondering what's going on, and they all greet him calling him His Highness. He says not to call him that, and they say understood. One of the women says that she'll step aside for a moment, and Jinshin asks what's wrong. She says that it seems that he saw Sophie. He asks if that's so. I don't even know what that means. They look worried as he walks closer. He looks down at the baby telling them to change his diaper. They all look apprehensive for some reason but start doing it anyways while still looking nervous. As she starts to undo the cloth, Jinshin stares in a surprise, telling somebody outside to get the captain and the guards. They start calling for him, but back to Buru and Uru they say they only need one wild boar to take back. Uru says there isn't a single ant in sight, why is he talking about a boar? Uru tells him that if he's talking to his elder he shouldn't be so rude. Uru reminds him that he is the original. Uru says he can think what he wants but he's definitely older. They then hear a sound and Uru asks if everybody else heard that. Uru tells everybody to stay alert and they all grab their weapons. They keep hearing the snorting sounds and they both look at each other realizing that tonight is boar meat. As they get closer to the sound what they see instead is a foot. They're all alarmed. Then Uru asks if they're seeing this shit as the pigs in this area are walking on two legs. Uru says more importantly the pigs are a really blue color. Uru says no shit, they're all bruised up. Uru wonders what the hell that even means, but they both start tweaking, saying that it doesn't matter if it's walking on two legs as long as the meat tastes good, that's all that matters. The orcs are just looking at each other confused. Uru and Buru both have a hunger on their side and start glaring at their new food. They then recognize that they're food now, but it's too late as Uru and Buru jump at them and all we hear is them screaming. Meanwhile, Jinshin is putting his knife to one of the maidens' throats. She looks up at him horrified. The captain of the guards enters the room seeing this, wondering what's going on. Uru says that the child has changed yet no one here can explain why. The captain of the guards realizes what he's talking about and instantly bows. He pulls out another letter. Jinshin asks why there's two letters. The captain tells him that another letter was instructed to be delivered once the destination is reached. Jinshin asks if there really were two letters and the guard says that's correct. Jinshin takes and starts reading it. As he does so, Yulye, his brother, says that this child is not his heir. She is the daughter of Yuan, captain of the guards who stayed behind to protect him, and he thought that her life would be far too short to remain in this place to be burned. That's why he sent her to him, and he is sorry for deceiving him. It couldn't be helped. Otherwise he would have thrown his life away to protect the country. While they are both of the same bloodline, he did not want to put his brother who has spent his life on the battlefield through such cruelty, so he should not blame himself for failing to protect the country, and that he who rose to the throne through a coup must bear the karma that comes with that. His life was lived as a mere puppet of power. As one of the generals slowly approaches him, Yulye says that he hopes that his brother will live differently and carry out everything according to his will. These are his final wishes to his brother. Jinshin looks pissed, but there's a smaller note at the bottom that says that he hopes that child who grows up well becomes his partner. Not too sure what that means yet, but Jinshin says that His Majesty has granted him freedom. He bows to him, and this must be why they were calling him His Highness, because they knew that this was not the heir to the throne. Jinshin stares at the little girl and stretches his hand out to her. She grabs onto it and he's surprised, and instantly his heart starts to melt when she laughs with him. He turns, telling them to change her diaper. Jinshin asks about the child's mother. The captain says that she stayed behind to protect the castle following her husband, Yuan. He realizes that he should be punished for deceiving Jinshin, but Jinshin walks past him and heads outside to get a fresh breath of air, wondering what he must do now, and wonders what he must do now. He first took a sword at the age of 6 and stepped onto the battlefield at 16. When they abandoned the homeland and fled, he fought at the very front of it, and as a bastard born of the emperor's bloodline, his duty was to protect the empire, but now the reason for his existence has disappeared entirely. He's in an unknown land and he doesn't know what to draw his sword for. After that night, everybody regroups and he asks how the surroundings are. Uru and Buru say that they scouted the forest, but there were no enemies, and that the atmosphere of this is very different from what they're used to. The environment is also odd. The trees look different compared to what they're used to, but the strangest thing is that pigs are walking on 2 legs. A man then bursts into the meeting room and the captain of the guards asks what the meaning of this interruption is. He says that it seems that heaven has been angered. The captain asks what the hell that even means, and when they step outside, he points up at the sky, telling them to look at this shit, and all of them are surprised by what they see as the moon has 2 other moons beside it, leaving them completely puzzled. Hui points out that even the stars are different, as if it was a completely different world. Jinshin asks if that is so, and says at least they don't have to worry about the Tang army for now. Hui says that's true, but before he can finish his sentence, Jinshin heads back inside. Night passes, and the next morning comes, and we see an orc absolutely tweaking. We see Buru and Uru holding it. Jinshin notices them. The orc manages to break free and starts running. They ask where he thinks he is going, and jump on top of him, taking him to France. Jinshin says it's weird the pigs walk on 2 legs, and says maybe it's someone wearing a pig mask. The orc starts begging them to wait and that they can talk. But of course they don't understand its language. Uru says that it sounds like the pig is trying to talk to them, but Uru tells him he's stupid, asking what kind of animal can talk to a human, and that they should just hurry it up. Uru then starts tickling it, making the pig scream, just begging to be killed instead. He then punches it in the side. Holy shit, did he just kill it? Nope, it's still squealing. But Jinshin asks what they are doing, and Hui tells them they are performing a ritual. Jinshin says fine, but why are they tickling it? And Hui says that a smiling sacrifice would be better. Jinshin sighs, as he can't believe that's what's going on, and he tells them both to stop. They ask why, saying that it's the ritual for food, and he says the ritual can be done later, and since the pig is a green color it might be sick. A man quickly runs over, saying there's a problem, and Buru asks what it is, asking if a dog or cow is ready to walk on 2 legs this time. The dude is surprised, asking how he knew. They're all just kind of standing there in disbelief until we see a giant minotaur smashing through one of their gates. It unleashes a very powerful roar, and all the soldiers ready their weapons, but they're just surprised, asking how a cow can walk on 2 legs. The minotaur closes in, and does a big swing, hitting their shields directly, sending the front line flying through the air, and one of them orders the rest to throw their axes. As they do so, it hits the minotaur all over, and while it bleeds a little bit, it wasn't enough to stop it. Instead, it completely enraged it. It raises its axe into the air, but before it can finish, something flies in and wraps around both of its horns, causing it to miss its attack. It's Buru and Uru, saying that this is insane, asking what the deal with this place is. Uru then asks everybody what they are doing, saying that it's not moving, so they need to shoot their arrows at it. The minotaur grits its teeth, and starts running, trying to take them both with it, and Buru and Uru ask if it's really trying to have a power struggle with them. As they both say bet, they turn, and both pull in unison, causing the minotaur to fall. They then order them to fire, and as they do so, it hits the minotaur all over, riddling it with arrows. It falls to its knees, and Buru leaps into the air with his axe before cutting its head smooth off. It rolls across the ground, and bounces before the shields. What a beast. Buru then puts his axe on its back, and starts laughing, telling Uru that they should be okay to eat this. Uru says that's only if Jinshin tells them not to eat it again. And then they hear the sound of more, turning to see 3 more pulling up into their camp, but behind them there are also werewolves, and they ask how dogs are standing on 2 legs. One of the minotaurs spots the other one's head on the ground, and starts to get pissed as it charges straight in. Uru and Uru say that they should do half and half. Uru asks who's going to get the last one then, and Buru says they'll just have to find out. The minotaur in the lead swings down, but Buru blocks the attack. He grits his teeth, but doesn't budge. Uru then backsteps, and attacks as well, and the werewolves take this chance to flank on the side as well as one of the minotaurs. The minotaur sees that Buru is stuck, and goes to finish the job, but something slashes by in an instant, as we see blood followed by the minotaur's hand being cut off, as Jinshin was the one who did it. The minotaur begins screaming in pain as the blood paints the field, and Jinshin is confused. Buru then punches the minotaur, sending it stumbling backwards from the attack. He then lowers his stance, and swings his axe in an uppercut motion, cleaving it clean in 2, and while he's smiling, Uru's in the back readying his arrows. He dodges the attack, and while flipping through the air, fires 2, hitting it in the chest, and the head, killing it instantly. As it falls onto the floor, he does a superhero landing too. As all 3 of the minotaurs are now dead, Jinshin says that he feels really light, asking Hui if he knows why. Hui says that the gravity here is weak, so their armor, weapon, and their body will all feel lighter than usual. Jinshin asks if that's really the case, saying that makes sense though. He then cleans his blade of the blood. As the minotaur whose arm he just cut off is enraged, going to finish the job, it slams the floor where he was standing, thinking that he got it, but as soon as it raises its fist, it realizes there's nothing there. Until it gets cut into even more pieces, and Jinshin starts to sheath his blade. He says right now those Tang bastards would be no match for him, and it sure is a shame. His men as well are easily dispatching the werewolves, causing the rest to flee. As they watch them run into the woods, Jinshin tells Buru to go chase them down, and wipe them out, then expand the search area, and find out what else is out there. Off in the woods, we see 2 people running, a man and a woman. The woman's name is Sarah, and their language is different from the one Jinshin and them are speaking. But the man tells her to get to the village, but she tells Varen that she can't, and he tells her to hurry. She cries, and shakes her head no. As the heavy-ass footsteps start walking towards them, he draws back his bow, and aims it into the tree line, and we see where the stomping has come from, as there's a giant ogre walking straight to them. It begins to roar, and Varen tells it to shut up, and shoots his arrow at it, but it bounces off its skin. He realizes this is bad, and begs Sarah once more to run. She starts debating it before turning, and crying while running away, but she stumbles, and falls onto the floor, and the ogre spots her, and starts walking towards her. Varen realizes he needs to get its attention, and starts screaming, and shooting it more, saying to eat him instead. As he goes to pick up Sarah, he screams no, but in a flash, Buru picks her up, and takes her to safety off on the side. Sarah looks horrified, and Buru is confused, asking what that thing is, and he thinks it's way bigger than the cow. Sarah opens her eyes confused, asking what the hell a dwarf is doing here. Buru starts hitting her with that crazy short king riz. He just wonders what the word dwarf means, and that's the only thing he can understand. Then she tells him to dodge, and points behind him, but of course he doesn't understand her language, and the ogre slams down where they were standing, sending a big shockwave through the forest. But we see him putting Sarah down, and she's still just stunned. He smiles at her, and instantly takes off, heading straight towards the ogre, then does a sick-ass flip, telling it to split apart, as he cuts it straight in the middle. She gasps, and Varen is utterly speechless as they watch the ogre get cut in 2. Varen says there's no way that's possible, and Buru hits that cool-ass pose right after. The ogre falls into 2 behind him, and he looks back towards Sarah, and starts to run his fingers through his hair, saying that there must be a higher order, and that wasn't so bad, was it? They're both just confused, but instantly start bowing, thanking him, calling him a dwarf, but in their language, thanks is his name, and he just asks how they knew his name to begin with. Back at the camp, we see both Varen and Sarah inside the tent while the soldiers are gathering around staring at them. Varen says that no matter what happens, he'll save her. We learn that he's actually her uncle, and she says no, she's too hurt to move anyway, and at least he can't escape and warn the village. He asks how he could possibly abandon her, and Buru tells him to stop yapping. He enters, telling him to speak so he can understand. Varen is still trying to convince her to leave, and the soldiers are going crazy over her hair color and skin complexion, asking if they really landed in the West. But they continue speaking as he stares at them. He can tell that she's uncomfortable, and tells everybody to beat it. They start running away. Jinshin says they must be the locals. Uru says exactly, but Jinshin is more curious if they can understand them. Uru says they told him his name, but he can't figure out anything else. Jinshin looks around. At the camp spotting the orc, then says they don't know where they are, and they need to know what else is here besides walking pigs and cows, because unknown dangers could cut their life threads. For that they need words. Of course Sarah and Varen don't understand him, and Jinshin says they'll end up finding a way. Hui says he'll try to think of something, but Buru says he knows what could be a solution here. He says what then? There's actually somebody here who's a genius that knows every language. Of course it's none other than Wongsum, and he introduces himself. Apparently he knows every language under the sun. Jinshin asks if it's true. He says he traded west with his parents when he grew up, so he picked up a lot of foreign languages. Jinshin tells him to try talking, and he says this is his chance to prove his worth now. All throughout his life he's been to many places like Rome and Japan, and there's nowhere he hasn't been, and no language he doesn't know. He says bonjour to her, and she's just confused. He says he guesses that's a no, and then he says hello to her, and of course she doesn't understand that either. Jinshin wonders if he's wasting their time. Then Wongsum says he'll try the cheek-to-cheek greeting, and says bonjour once more. She's freaking out, and Buru asks what the hell he's doing. Jinshin is growing more annoyed, and Wongsum then starts going language after language until he gets hit on the head by Uru, saying that he guesses it won't work. Jinshin says that he forgot he's useless outside of battle, and Buru calls him a con man. Telling his brother to take him away, he starts dragging him, as Wongsum begs for another chance, and continues trying to get Sarah to answer, but it's no luck, and his new title is con man. After he leaves, Hui says that he'll try. He gets on one knee, while pointing at himself, and says his name. She's confused, and then he does it once more. She then starts saying his name, saying that she understands. He then asks for her name, and she tells him her name is Sarah. Everybody starts going crazy that Hui actually got it, and Buru laughs really loudly, saying that he already knew her name, as he called her name twice. Buru starts laughing, saying that she already knew his name when he saved her, and she once more thanks him, but in her language it just sounds like his name, and he laughs, saying that she has a good memory. Jinshin says that it sounds like he's just yapping, and Hui tells him to let him have his fun. Jinshin stands up, saying that it's time for them to call it a day, and everybody salutes him. They all leave Sarah and Varen to stare at him, and Varen says that he's still here though, because they ignored him. Later that night at another outpost, inside we see a man looking down at his table eating some food. His name is Baron Alvin of the Haiyan Kingdom, and his guard is named Tilluman. A man in tears says that the mercenary band will seize the farming village soon. Alvin wipes his mouth, saying that he can't believe those vermin are fleeing the kingdom, and he'll make them pay for that. Sometime later, Jinshin asks if they're leaving tomorrow, and Hui says they are, but strangely, Sarah follows both Buru and Uru well, and so they decided to send her along on this trip. Jinshin says that purity and simplicity go hand in hand. Hui asks what that means, until he hears Buru saying that he's here. Jinshin tells them to enter, and we see Sarah with him. Hui now understands exactly what he meant by purity and simplicity, and laughs a little bit about it. Jinshin says that they should go to the village and let them know that they help them, and that they're peaceful. Buru says that he will, and to trust him, but Jinshin says no, and that he's gonna send the captain of the guards. We finally learn his name is Dimu Diok, to go with him. Buru asks why all of a sudden, and if he really doesn't trust him. Jinshin says it's not that. He needs to focus on looking after that child, and making a good impression, and since Uru needs to organize information about that place with someone named Varen, he's attaching the captain of the guards to this detail. Uru says that he didn't realize he was planning this far ahead, and laughs, saying that he thought he didn't trust him, and that he understands. Jinshin stares at him, saying that the only thing he can trust him in is combat, but he didn't want to tell him that. As they're heading to the village, they're escorting some of the orcs with them. Uru recalls Jinshin saying that Dimu Diok has a mountain of work to do within the camp, and so he'll just send the two of them to go, and come back safely. They tell him not to worry, and excitedly walk off, and Jinshin, though of course, doesn't like that, and isn't pleased with it. As they're using the orcs to pull the carriage, they then start smelling something, and their movements become a little more stiff. As they continue, one of the men says that he can see the village. Uru then tells everyone to stop, and then calls out for the con man. Of course, it's Wongsum. Wongsum says that he's not a con man though, and that he learned to speak their language in just 10 days. Uru asks if he wants to go through more hellish training, and of course, Wongsum doesn't. Uru then tells him to just ask if this is the village, so he starts chatting up Varen, and they're going back and forth. Varen says that the villagers might get scared of them, so he goes with Sarah, and they can explain the situation first. Wongsum thanks him before getting smacked in the back of the head. And Buru asks why he's talking about him like that. Wongsum is dying, and then explains that his name is actually just thank you in their language, before he gets hit again, and Buru tells him to learn not to say his name so casually. Uru then tells him to stop, as he's scaring the kid. But for some reason, Sarah's not surprised. He turns back, and smiles at her, and she says that thank you to them must scare them. When they get to the village, they need to warn their people not to say thank you to them. When they do arrive, Varen is confused, wondering where everyone went. She then spots some people in the square, and they walk over, but as they're going, Varen realizes something's wrong, and quickly hides her. He tells her to be quiet, and he peers around the corner, as we see the elder asking what the meaning of this is. He's talking to a man named Captain Myron, saying that he thought that they would take care of the orc horde, and receive food and money. Myron lowers himself down to his level, saying that the village chief does not understand the situation, and he says that it must be because he's old and dull. Serious meth mouth. He then asks why they would risk their lives fighting orcs when they can make money by capturing them all instead. His men start to smile, and he orders his men not to injure the women, but they can do whatever they want of the men, and kill anybody who has no value. As they start clubbing them to death, it turns into pure chaos. A woman begs for her child to be saved, and one of the mercenaries looks down at her plot, and says that it depends on what she does if she wants that to happen. He then grabs her, and starts dragging her away, and the elder sees this, and starts screaming before his head gets shoved into the floor by Myron, saying that it's better to live as a slave than be eaten by orcs. The village chief watches her get dragged around the corner of a house, and can't believe what's going on. He says they fled here to escape the kingdom's tyranny, and became farmers, but it was his mistake to trust people so easily. But he hopes Varen and Sarah never return, because at least they must be safe. Varen starts to panic, and says that Sarah needs to go inform them of the situation. She asks what he's gonna do, and he says he'll buy as much time as he can. She tries to talk him out of it, but then notices something behind him, as we see a guy listening to the conversation, saying that it looks like there were little mice hiding nearby. A little later, they're both thrown onto the floor, as we see Varen has been beaten. The elder spots them, and starts screaming no, and the pork chop who brought her says that he found her behind the barracks. Myron tells him to deal with it, and he starts to grab her, ready to take her away and abuse her. Varen tells him to stop, before he gets kicked in the face. He starts dragging her away while she screams, and then his body starts to shake a little bit, and Sarah's confused, before he starts to fall backwards, as an axe is implanted into his skull. Myron asks what's going on, and we see Buru riding in on this horse, and they're asking why a dwarf is here. All the mercenaries are staring at it now, saying that his axe is massive. He then parks the whip, and hops out of it, asking Sarah if she's alright, as this place is dangerous, and she should take Varen and get out of here. She does so, and he yells, telling them all to brace themselves. The mercenaries are confused until they hear more horses, and the boys finally pull up. Buru tells them all to beat them, and treat them like beasts, and if they're armed, to kill them instantly. The cavalry recharges straight in, and takes out the mercenaries with complete ease. One of the men who was trying to tickle the woman behind the house runs over, pulling his pants back on, and asking what's going on, and when he turns, his head gets sent flying into the air. Good shit, Buru. The slaughter continues, until Myron and a couple of his men hop on horseback. One of them asks if the kingdom sent the night order, but Myron says there's no way they could have come here this fast. The other man says he's never seen nights like these, and Myron as well has never heard of such a night order in the kingdom, or on the continent, and wonders what's going on. His man tells him they need to make a quick decision, before he gets some crazy back shots, and dies instantly. He spots what he says is the bolt of a crossbow, and wonders what's going on, and starts to have severe anxiety, and one of his men yells, telling him to look, and when he does, he sees an archer cavalry. He says that from arrows flying all the way over there, he says that makes no sense that they're using bows, and what he saw was a crossbow bolt, because a normal arrow can't fly that far. He realizes they're outclassed, and if they don't flee, they're all going to die. As he starts, he tells his men to run, and that they need to get out of here. As they start running, Buru spots them fleeing, and asks where the hell they think they're running off to, and instantly chases them. Myron then tells one of his men named Joltung to kill them, but to Buru, that word is another word for shorty, and he starts to get pissed. Myron once more yells at his men to turn around and fight, and as they do so, Buru of course doesn't even hesitate. He tightens the grip on his axe, and starts mowing them down, instantly killing all three of them. He then starts surfing on his horse, and leaps off of it toward another one of the men, and when he looks up, all he sees is Buru, before he gets split down the middle, as well as his horse, and it's not just that, the ground as well gets shattered, and Myron already knew they messed up, but this is on a different level, as Buru glares at him, not wanting to let him escape. His heart starts racing, and he yells, telling more of his men to turn and fight, and as they do so, Buru says this is more ridiculous than regular infantry. He'll give them that they're good at running, but that's all he'll do. As the enemy horses charge at him, he tells his men to deal with the ones in front of him, and they quickly storm by, obliterating them in an instant. One of his men asks about the one who's running, and Buru says that they shouldn't waste their time, because of course, his brother Uru is still here. Myron's about to make it out of the city, and the village, saying that he needs to go report this to Alvin immediately, before he hears the sound of an arrow, and feels it right after. He and his men are instantly all taken off of their horses, and he stumbles along the floor. He starts to stand up, holding onto his wounds, and as Uru and the rest prepare their next shots, he readies his arrow, and draws it back, and all we see is complete darkness. Inside the darkness, he catches a glimpse of Myron, and readies himself. Myron says that that's not a dwarf, that's a monster. The arrow flies in, and he doesn't even confirm it hit, and just tells his men that it's time to go, because he's that confident. As we see Myron's brain juices on the floor. Back at the village, people are crying, holding their loved ones, and the woman who is potentially tickled is holding on to her husband. Uru says the most beast-like creature of all his men, and the elder begs that they spare their lives. Varen tells them all to calm down, as they are here to help them, and they ask if that's true, saying that they thought they were soldiers from the extermination force, and they ask how the hell they would have come this far to begin with, and they realize now that they've been saved. Uru tells Wongsum to relay what he says properly, and he says okay, but Uru senses something, and he looks off into the woods, saying that they're going to have to talk about that later. Uru asks what he sees, saying that he doesn't see a single thing, but when he looks closer, he sees a bunch of eyes staring at him, and he is confused, asking why there are so many pigs here now. One of the men starts to ride away on horseback, and recalls Buru telling him that he has to go tell Jinshin what's happening. He hopes that they hold on until he gets back, as he continues riding to the camp. The orcs continue coming out, and Buru yells for Con Man. Wongsum asks what he needs, and Buru tells him to gather up every able-bodied man with a bow. As the orcs continue drawing closer and closer, Buru watches as all of the men are given direct orders to draw their bows back, and ready themselves. Uru starts reprimanding them, saying that bow is ass, and he tells Wongsum that when he gives the signal, he needs to signal the other ones, asking how many arrows they have left. His men start telling him how many each of them have, and then Buru says that will be enough, and to put them all in the quiver. Finally at the tree line, the orcs start to come into sight. The cavalry archers draw their bows back first, and the elder of the village says that there's no way they'll hit from this far away, and even Varen is doubtful, saying that he knows they're amazing, but there's no way they can defeat this many orcs. The orcs start to charge at them, and Uru yells, saying that if they don't take down at least 2 with one shot, they're all going to die here, and he tells his men to let him have it. In unison they fire out their arrows, and each person does start doing the collapse, taking out multiple orcs with a single shot. The villagers are surprised, as they can't even see the arrows, and yet the orcs are dying, and they say that has to be a magic item. Uru then orders the men to follow him on horseback as they charge in. Speaking of charging, the guy finally makes it back to the camp, and he quickly dismounts, and runs to Jinshin yelling for him. He says that there's a herd of at least 100 pigs, orcs attacking the village. Hui looks surprised, and Jinshin realizes he has to act. Back at the village, one of the orcs is close and personal, but gets a spear straight through its skull, as Buru and his men are making quick work of them, doing a hit-and-run tactic, abusing the fact that their intelligence is not that high. Uru is enjoying it, saying that in the end pigs are still pigs, and Uru says that's a fact, and that he and his twin are straight experts at hunting them. One of them starts running away, causing the rest to follow, and Buru says it's time to drive them into the forest, and chase after. As they start doing so, one of the heads flies through the back lines, and rolls in front of Buru. He looks up confused, as he sees a new set of eyes slowly walking forward, as this orc is brandishing a weapon, and carrying the other's corpse. He wonders what's going on now, and this orc yells, telling the others that if they flee from humans he will chew them into pieces. They start calling out to their chief, trying to explain it to him, But he doesn't care, and as long as he is here the orcs will be victorious, and to show them their valor. His name is Mukabal, and he is a hero, and strategist who was the first orc to introduce military formations. He starts chanting his name, as do the rest, and he tells them to split into 4 groups, and attack the village. They start to charge back in, ignoring Buru, and he is surprised that a pig is using tactics, and he tells his men they need to hurry back to the village. As they start to do so, we see the orcs climbing over the walls, leaping at one of the villagers, and he holds his spear, and falls to the ground, and it impales itself on him. Blood starts blinding him, while the pig starts to chop off his arm. The man starts screaming, before an arrow flies in straight to the dome. The man holds onto his arm, as Uru tells him to snap out of it, and he sees more climbing over, and realizes he doesn't have any arrows left, so he grabs his axe, and throws it, killing it instantly. Now that he's out of weapons, he starts picking up rocks, and throwing them, telling the man to grab his spear, and continue fighting, as he won't die just from losing an arm. The man does so, as backup arrives to help Uru, and Uru says they need to push them back, because if they break through they're all going to die. He then hears screaming behind him, and turns, seeing an orc go after the women, and Buru finally makes it back in, and cuts his head smooth off. As it falls to the floor, he tells his brother this is getting out of hand, and Uru says no shit, as they've definitely killed around 200 of them, but it seems like there's no end to them, and at this rate it'll be very hard to hold out until reinforcements arrive, and if it were just them they could run, but now they can't, as there are too many innocent lives here at stake. Buru and Uru both smile, and say it can't be helped, they just have to hold out, and that running away from pigs is something that a man of Gali wouldn't do. Mukabal orders his men to charge in through the wall they broke open, as they start swarming down the mountain, and Buru and Uru both ready themselves to hold them off. As they both charge in, they stop and so do the orcs because the ground begins to rumble violently. Uru looks over, spotting dust and horses, and now they both realize that Jinshin's made it. As they're charging straight in, Buru begins laughing. While the orcs are confused, he takes the chance to cleave them clean in half, saying it's time to continue their pig hunt. And he and Uru are super hyped up. Wongsum and the rest are fighting now too, as Jinshin's still getting in close. He orders them to move in a wedge formation. And the orcs start calling out that the cavalry's here. From up top, Mukabal's watching the fight, saying that he's devoted his life to preparing for the day that they'd face human cavalry, as he's going to revolutionize the orc strategy. He says no matter how skilled their riders are, they'll never break through the wall of their brave warriors, telling them to unite. They start chanting, getting on top of each other, making an actual monster wall. As Buru and Uru are surprised by what they're doing, they're just confused as well, asking what the hell that is. Uru asks how he's meant to know that, and Mukabal says that they're going to be mercilessly crushed by this. Hui tells him that if they run straight into it, it won't be good for them. Jinshin calls them strange, as he just speeds up his horse. They start to veer off to the right, and some of his men veer off to the left. The orcs continue screaming, unite over and over. Jinshin comes in close, and one of them even passes straight by his face, as he and his men are pivoting around them. Mukabal starts laughing, saying that the human cavalry is fleeing from their valor. The orcs as well are all saying long live. The villagers draw back their bows. Uru says that they truly couldn't miss a target they could hit with their eyes closed, telling them to shoot already. They do so, and begin hitting the orcs with back shots, causing the tower to crumble on itself. Mukabal says as expected, they're moving, and he tells his men to scatter. As they start spreading in different directions, Mukabal laughs, thinking his strategy's good, but Jinshin's just confused. Bro is cooking and burning this shit. At first they banded together and opened a path for them, but now they're making it easier for them to get picked off. He says they'll have a full-speed counterattack, telling his men to go straight for it. They charge in, picking them off one after the other. Once more, Mukabal tells his men to form up and unite. They get shot down, and they try running away once more. This happens over and over, until Mukabal finally gets pierced in the chest with a spear. He can't believe it, as he's falling off the cliff face first, and Jinshin was the one who threw it, saying that'll definitely quiet things down. The orcs start screaming, saying that their chief is dead, and Jinshin tells his men to slaughter the rest. As they do so, some of them begin flinging into the mountains, and the villagers let out some primal screams, as they've actually managed to survive. This continues until Jinshin arrives in the village, and his men all greet him. The villagers look up at him, unsure of how to act, but Jinshin just looks around, seeing all the death, and how they're still all injured, and he asks for an interpreter. The orcs are left to wait for Jinshin to come back. Uru tells Conman to get up there, and Jinshin says they'll be leaving now. Wongsum translates it, and I think the translators had a stroke. Uru says that Jinshin needs to listen, but Hui shakes his head no. The villagers say that if they leave now, what will happen if the others return, and Jinshin tells them to protect their own lives. The villagers are in disbelief and fall to their knees, begging for him to protect them all. Wongsum tells him, and Jinshin asks if they wish to become slaves. Wongsum translates it, and they look surprised, and Varen says that in the end, they might be no different from the kingdom. But Jinshin tells them that they are people who live to protect their nation and families and their people. They did not take up the sword to protect those who would hand their lives over to others like them. The elder once more begs for him to save them, but Jinshin says this land is their kingdom alone, saying surely they understand that their kingdom is something they must protect themselves. They shouldn't have summoned people they couldn't handle, and the money should have been used to buy swords and armor. A kingdom protected by the strength of others is bound to fall. So he wants to know if they wish to become slaves, or will they take up a sword and risk their life to protect their family. If they take up the sword, he will allow them to become his people and his family. Hui, Buru, and Uru all look at Jinshin full of admiration, full of respect for their leader, and the villagers are still just terrified. Jinshin looks a bit disappointed and tells his men that he's going to be heading back. A young boy says that he'll take up the sword himself. Jinshin stops, and the boy yells, saying that even if he dies, this means Jinshin will protect his family. Jinshin looks over at him, recalling the boy that he saved who wanted to fight instead of his father, and he dismounts his horse. The kid looks worried as Jinshin approaches him, and he tells him that his grip is sloppy. He teaches him how to properly hold the sword, and tells him that now that he's holding it, he should not think of dying. He must live to protect his family. Jinshin does need a translator to know that the kid says yes, as his eyes begin swelling up with tears and his eyes light up. Jinshin as well looks a little happier. The kid has sparked courage in the villagers, and he tells his men to bring them with as they retreat back to their camp. Sometime later, in the village, some birds are resting right above Myron's corpse, and as we hear the sound of a horse getting closer and closer, it's finally upon the body, and we see it's none other than Tilluman. Then they walk into the village, seeing all the bodies strewn about. One of his men says they have searched the entire area, but there are no farmers left. Alvin then asks Tilluman what he thinks happened, and Tilluman says that it seems both the orcs and mercenaries were killed by the same party. Alvin asks if he is trying to imply that the farmers killed both the orcs and mercenaries, and fled, but Tilluman says he doesn't think so, as he found an arrow he had never seen before, and that there is an unknown faction intervening. Alvin asks why someone else would dare covet his property, and turns around pissed, saying that once they have gathered all the farmers to be tributed to the kingdom, he will eliminate them. Back to the camp, Jinshin and the rest are finally returning with the villagers trailing behind, and of course the men are pogging out once more because of their skin colors. They are talking about how pretty one of them is, and Buru asks why they are drooling so much, and says that just because he was gone, it seems they have been slacking on their training, and that they should look forward to today's training. Dimudiak asks what the situation is with the refugees behind Jinshin, and he says that from now on they are people of Gali as well. Dimudiak asks if that means he is about to continue the line of the emperor, and Jinshin asks what he is talking about. Dimudiak says to accept the message people means, but before he can finish his sentence Jinshin cuts him off, saying that what they need now are soldiers to repel invaders, and women and children who can become the heart of the will to protect, and that is why he brought them here. Dimudiak is still trying to understand what he is saying, but Jinshin says this is enough. Hui then calls out to him, saying that since he has already accepted them as his people he should do as the commander of the guard says, and continue the line of the emperor. They do not know where they are, or even if this is the world they lived in, and giving the soldiers and the people a goal will become a pillar to support their lives, and he must make that decision. Jinshin turns at him, and Hui smiles. Jinshin says that he would be better off as the High Emperor because he doesn't want to do it. Dimudiak asks how he can say such a thing, and Jinshin says that maybe he will have Buru or Uru do it. Dimudiak says hell no, this isn't a situation for jokes. Jinshin thinks about it, and tells both Hui and Dimudiak that he is a man who has lived his entire life on the battlefield, and he is not competent in state affairs, and that Dimudiak can handle the affairs of this place as he sees fit. Dimudiak tries to persuade him once more, but Jinshin says he will do what he can, therefore he too must take charge of the part he is capable of, and he is not telling him to become the emperor, as an incompetent emperor will ruin the nation. The only things he knows how to do are wage war, and protect. Once more Dimudiak goes to say something to him, but gets cut off by some of the villagers screaming about the Titan clan. They turn, and Jinshin asks what is going on, as they see dwarfs kneeling to Buru, and Buru thinking they are part of some old clan. Buru and Uru jokingly say they can't leave their relatives here, and when they get a better look, they can tell they aren't like the other locals. One of the dwarfs looks up at them panicked, and we get a flashback to them all three waddling away from some orcs. They are the three stone brothers. Gray says this is all his fault. It's because of his greed to find an Orvain that they came all the way to the mountains, and are now being chased by orcs, but while they are running they turn surprised to see some of the soldiers save them, but are confused because their skins are yellowish, and they have black hair and eyes, and they are a little different from the humans they know. Even the men stare at them, and say they are both like General Uru and Buru. Sometime later, at a nearby blacksmith, here at the blacksmith he says that they seem to be blacksmiths in this world, but he has no idea what they are doing all the way out here. They are staring at the blaze, asking how the hell a human could create such a weapon, and then that is when Jinshin returned. They looked out the window, and were instantly surprised to see Uru and Buru, and called them brothers. They say that because they have bronze skin and black hair the legend was true, and that's why all the weapons here are as such, and that's why they were bowing to them. They all three start dancing in unison, and Buru and Uru were just confused, but feel a little offended. Jinshin doesn't really care for what's going on, then heads out to the docks. He recalls Hui telling him that he needs to make this decision, but as well as recalling his brother's words about how to carry out his will. While he is a descendant of the emperor, he was an illegitimate son, and he spent half of his life on the battlefield. The Gali he sought to protect went up in flames, and he came here to protect what he thought was the heir to the throne, but it was a girl, not a boy, and that child was not even a descendant of his brother. He must make a choice for the soldiers who believe in him, and if this is the world he came from he will build his strength, and strike the Tang. If not, then he will continue the history of Gali, as that will be his main duty, and purpose for those who follow him. He looks up at the moon, seeing the two extra ones instantly, and he realizes it, and smiles, saying that it seems that it has been decided, and he walks back inside. Some time later, we see them actually having set up a little settlement, and they're dressed normally now, as they are no longer in their battle outfits. Hui says at first the farmers were wary of the soldiers, but now they've grown close enough to fall in love with one another, and we see exactly that happening. Hui says that within 1 month the food problem was solved thanks to the seeds the farmers brought, and as for the dwarves it turns out they are not only blacksmiths but also architects, so the housing problem was also easily resolved. They were impressed by their ironworking techniques, and apparently making various things under Old Man Jiang, and they bow once more to Buru and Uru. And Jinshin says surely it's all thanks to these two. Hui says the problem is the liquor and meat to be used for the wedding ceremony in a few days, and the lack of clothing, and they are also short on bows. Jinshin asks what the solution is, and Hui says that according to Varen, if they sneak into the city, and sell the hides and bones of the creatures called monsters, they can make money, and with the money earned they can purchase the things they cannot obtain here, solving the food, clothing, and even weapon issues. Demu Diok says that he will go, but Hui says that since Demu Diok has so much work to do here, he'll go do it as well as taking the chance to survey the area. Jinshin thinks about it, and we see it's finally time for them to arrive, but it's not just Hui, as Jinshin, Varen, and Wongsum are there too. Hui asks why he came when he usually allows him to do these things alone, and says he should just be honest that he was curious. Jinshin tells him that they should just go, as they start riding up with carriages behind them, and we see a cloaked figure staring at them from behind a tree. At the city gates, the man ahead of them gets let in, but the guard turns, seeing Varen, telling him that he's worked hard. Varen then hands him a bribe, very nonchalantly, and the dude turns, telling him to go ahead and head in. As they all do, he finds it a little suspicious, and tells them to stop. He then tries to look at Jinshin's face, and he takes his spear, and puts it into his hood, and removes it forcefully, and is surprised to see his hair and skin color. Varen of course hands him more money, and laughs it off, and the dude taps Jinshin with his spear, telling him to go ahead and pass by. Now actually inside the city, Jinshin asks what that man's name was just now, and Varen tells him his name is Kalsuman. Jinshin gets annoyed, saying that he's got to remember that. Hui laughs, and then feels something suspicious, and turns towards a corner, but doesn't see anything, so he decides to ignore it for now, and it was the same man watching them from the tree, saying that that is definitely ogre hide, and so there must be ogre blood as well. They head into a shop to sell it, and the dude just asks Varen how the hell he killed an ogre, even 20 soldiers would struggle to take one down. Varen says that he'll tell him the story later, and he should just calculate all of this first, and then asks if he happens to need ogre blood. The man says that only wizards would buy that shit, but there's no way a wizard would be in such a remote place. Of course, the peeping Tom is a wizard, and he barges in, saying that he'll buy it, and they're surprised that there's actually a wizard here, and he hops over, saying that the condition is excellent, and with this he can finally be freed from the cursed second circle. The shopkeep asks what he thinks, and he says that he'll take 3 bottles for 1 gold, and 50 silver. The shopkeep says that he's sorry, but that price isn't possible. The wizard tells him to wait a moment, and he pulls out 1 gold, and 90 silver instead. Of course their expressions are unchanged, and he says this is all he has, and that surely they can make it work, as he's begging them. The shopkeep says that he's nothing more than a scammer trying to swindle him. Varen tries to de-escalate, but the wizard yells, asking how dare he, and he introduces himself as Riesel, the genius wizard said to appear once in 100 years. The shopkeep says that even third circle wizards are meant to be showered with gold, so how is he so broke, and for someone called a genius, surely he's not stuck at the second circle. Riesel took that to heart, and starts to hunch over, murmuring something, before he starts chanting, and casts a fireball. The shopkeeper is surprised, and says that although he has not attained enlightenment, and remains in the second circle, he's committed the sin of insulting a wizard. A mug then flies in, hitting him in the face, and knocking him onto the floor. Jinshin asks if beggars practice sorcery in this town, and Hui says that surely not, and it's more likely a sorcerer became a beggar. They walk over while he's passed out, and Hui says the sorcery in this place is pretty confusing. Riesel gives us his backstory, and he was once called a genius who appeared once in a century, and others needed 2 years to master mana, and he did it with just half a year, and becoming a grand wizard was just a matter of time, but when he stopped at the second circle, his master abandoned him, and he became an outcast anywhere he went. Believing there must be a path forward, he devoted his life to study, gaining knowledge rivaling even archmages, yet he could not conquer the second circle. They put him in the back of the carriage, and start hauling him away, as he just continues, telling his master not to abandon him, because with ogre blood he reached the second circle. Hui asks if they're really returning early because of this old man, and Jinshin says that the sorcerer, rather the wizard of this land, is rare, and knowledgeable. Hui asks if he's kidnapping him because he's afraid someone else would take him, and Jinshin says that's nonsense, he simply picked him. Hui asks what for, and what he's going to do with him, and Jinshin says that he's meant to be rare, and valuable, so why not? Riesel then starts crying in his sleep, before he jolts awake, and Jinshin says that it's about time, asking why he's crying. Hui says it's natural to cry after being kidnapped, and Jinshin says that he's just saying. Riesel wonders who these people are, and what they're planning to do with him, and he says they must not know that a mere rope can't bind a wizard. His eyes start to light up with mana, and he starts to strengthen himself, breaking the rope. He then casts Energy Bolt, and he says even though it's his second circle spell, it's not something to be taken lightly. It flies at Jinshin, and he hits it with his bare fist, which catches Riesel off guard. Hui says block, and somehow it actually does happen. Riesel sits there utterly speechless. Jinshin says that was pretty cool, and Hui agrees, and Riesel just asks what the hell happened to his spell. Riesel asks how he nullified his magic, and then he uses an interpretation spell, that is on his ring, but he asks who they are. Jinshin asks how he speaks in their language, and Riesel is more curious on how they can block an energy ball without a shield. Jinshin asks him once more how he knows their language, and Riesel tells them that it's his item of power, telling him to mind his own business. Jinshin asks what exactly that means, saying that he was worried since they left the con man behind in the city, but is glad they can communicate. Riesel asks once more how they turned the energy ball into nothing, wondering what formula he used. Hui says that it seems that he's also a sorcerer, so he must know that it's rude to ask another person's arts carelessly. Riesel goes to ask again, but Hui tells him to stop, and when he looks in front of him, we see a group of men walking towards them. Hui says that they should deal with their uninvited guest first. We see that there's a whole group of them, and the leader is none other than Zusammenfassung. He says it would be foolish to lose a consistent source of income over a single moment of greed, but the items loaded on their cart were quite numerous, and everything looked very expensive, and this was perfect timing. Since they split up, he can just kill these two, take the items, so he can keep the source of income, and take the goods, and he calls them unlucky. Until Hui says shatter, and 2 of the men's chests explode. He holds up a talisman, and Jinshin is off his horse now, says that that is a familiar face, calling him by his name. Zusammenfassung tells his men to attack them, and they charge straight towards them. Hui throws 3 more talismans, exploding 3 of them. Zusammenfassung is speechless, as Jinshin walks slowly towards him, glaring at him. One of his men leaps at him in the air, and Jinshin quickly unsheathes his sword, slicing him in half. Zusammenfassung tells his men once more to stop them, but they don't move at all, and he asks why they're just standing here. Hui casts another spell called Extinguish Fire, and once more 3 of the dudes start burning ablaze, turning into ash in front of him. Calsuman is horrified as he falls onto the ground, and Jinshin approaches him, looking down at him, telling him that he was a good man. Hui says that was impressive. He raises his sword into the air, and Calsuman starts screaming as Jinshin swings it down, and he hits him in the head, as Hui tells him to stop playing with him, and Jinshin just keeps tapping him over and over because of what he did on the horse, just over and over. Hui tells him that they should end their revenge here now, and go. Calsuman wonders if he's about to live, but Jinshin reaches into his coat, pulling out a talisman, and he instantly realizes it's bad, as Jinshin does the same spell that Hui did. Calsuman lets out a primal scream, but of course he's completely okay, as only the talisman burned, and Jinshin says as expected he still can't do it. Hui says if anyone could do it, it wouldn't be called sorcery. He then is surprised, saying that Calsuman's heart isn't beating anymore. Riesel though is still trying to analyze it, saying that he cast magic only using a trigger word, and no chant, and come to think of it, they're heading where the dragon lives, and he starts to misunderstand it, thinking that Hui himself must be the dragon that lives there. If he could become an attendant of a dragon, and understand the origin of magic, he could definitely surpass the second circle. Hui apologizes for kidnapping him, saying that if he doesn't like him, but Riesel starts folding instantly, saying that he must have brought him because he needs him, and if he gives him the command he'll do anything. They're both confused, but go along with it. They head out to the port, and Riesel is even more confused, saying that there's a village this well organized in the mountains that has the discipline and morale of soldiers that rival the empires. Buru and Uru greet them, asking who the old man is behind them. He sees them both, and asks what the Titan clan is doing here, and once again they wonder why they're being called that. Riesel says that these dwarves were meant to have vanished after the divine demonic war 1,000 years ago. Jinshin calls him a sorcerer, but corrects himself saying mage, saying that surely he hasn't forgotten the crime of trying to harm Varen. Riesel says it's because that bastard insulted him, and Jinshin tells Uru and Buru to take him to the execution ground. As they drag him away, they ask where they picked him up from, and Jinshin says he found him on the way. At the execution grounds, Jinshin says that while he said he simply picked him up, he also kidnapped the man, and that he can't forgive him for attempting to harm Varen who was the guide to one of his people. Riesel tells him that it's because they insulted him who is a mage, and Jinshin says he understands, and Riesel thanks him, but Jinshin says that he also insulted him by trying to harm his servant. Riesel asks how he could say such a thing, and Jinshin tells him that it's survival, the fittest, and good triumphs over evil, but it's not necessarily about good punishing evil, but about the victor taking everything. Riesel looks a bit anxious, and says that a weakling who kidnaps others is only speeding up their own demise. Jinshin asks if that's really the right thing to say in this situation, and that surely he could have realized that it wouldn't have been strange if he had beaten him to death on the spot, but he also lacks the skill to earn respect as a mage, asking if he's wrong. Of course, Riesel can't refute it because he's hard stuck in the second circle, and he says that his entire life, which has been 75 years, just feels full of regret. Jinshin says he'll give him a chance though, asking if he will continue to wander around like a beggar, or if he will try his luck staying here with him. Riesel asks what he means by that, and Jinshin says better than an outstanding mage, he needs a sage who possesses great knowledge of this world. As he approaches the execution, Jinshin says he will continue to live, and he asks him if he will join him. Riesel doesn't answer, so Jinshin tells him he'll ask one last time, saying that he needs him, wondering if he will join his cause. Riesel asks what he'll do for him, and Jinshin says that he doesn't stand by when someone mistreats his family or his people, and if anyone dares to look down on him, he'll smash them to bits. Riesel starts to tear up before bowing to him, saying that he will serve him as his master. Later that night, we see Riesel with Buru and Uru, and he's just confused, saying that he thought he would be treated as a servant, but instead Jinshin ordered Riesel to teach the two of them. They ask Jinshin what they're meant to learn at this age, and Jinshin says that they can't just stay here forever, they must understand the place to decide their path forward. Riesel misunderstands it, thinking that he's allowing him to teach people from the Titan clan, but of course we know that's not true. Jinshin then says that instead of him relying on the item, he has to learn their language, and until he does he'll be holding on to that ring. Riesel is confused, and Jinshin says that he doesn't think that he took it because he wanted it, but Riesel says he must have his reasons. After a bit of them learning, Buru and Uru both pass out, and Riesel says in the end dwarves are still dwarves. Jinshin then enters. As Riesel greets him in his language, Jinshin stares at him, and takes the ring off his finger, handing it to him, and then turns around, telling him that it's broken. As Riesel puts it back on his finger, he uses the magic, telling him that it's not broken, but it's too late, as Jinchen's already gone. Elsewhere that night, we see Wongsum and Varen on their way back. Wongsum notices something, and realizes that they are walking into a trap. He tells Varen to stop, and he hops off the whip, and puts his ear to the ground, listening for footsteps. Varen asks what he's doing, and he can instantly tell that his gut was right, and he tells Varen they are abandoning the cart. He takes his sword, and ties it around his chest, saying that he needs to hurry unless he wants to die a pointless death. Varen is confused, and they wait in the forest nearby, watching the cart. As they do, 2 knights from the city approach it, saying they can't believe they would abandon it, and that they couldn't have gone far, so they need to spread out, and find them. They start walking towards them into the woods, and Varen wonders what to do. Wongsum stands up though as Varen panics, wondering if he's going to die like this, but after it gets a little silent, he opens his eyes, seeing that Wongsum has already dealt with the 2 of them, and the last guy is unable to move. Wongsum didn't think Wongsum was actually this strong. Wongsum tells the man that it's best for him to stay quiet, and if he answers his questions honestly he can go home to see his wife and children. The man tells him that he's single though, and Wongsum just kind of stares at him, then asks why he attacked them. He says that it was an order from the kingdom to conscript soldiers, so Alvin is capturing farmers to fill his quota. Wongsum says this must be why the mercenaries attacked Varen's village to begin with, and the man begs to be spared, and then he goes to say that he has a foxy lady. Wongsum says he thought he was single, and the dude says that he has a girlfriend. Wongsum wonders if he should just kill him or not, but puts his blade down, saying that as he promised he'll let him go since he answered the questions, but it would make him a little uneasy if he went back the way he came, so he should close his eyes, and walk away until he counts to 1,000 before he heads back. Varen asks if this is alright, because if they let him go, a pursuit party might come after them. Wongsum tells her not to worry about that, as he's an honest fellow that wouldn't sell them out. The dude says of course not to worry as he walks away, and Wongsum tells him to go full speed. As he does, he's happily singing, and walking forward until he screams. Varen wonders what's going on, and Wongsum laughs, saying that he should have been more careful, as we see he made him walk straight off a cliff. Varen calls him a liar, and Wongsum says that he actually kept his promise. Other men arrive, asking what's going on as they see their fellow soldier dead on the floor, and they start to surround them. Wongsum smiles, asking why he's always being tested by the heavens like this. One of the knights says it's just the 2 of them, and they should finish this, and head back fast. Varen asks him what he's going to do as they start to slowly approach them. Back at the village, Sarah is running somewhere, and she goes into Buru's room, and he asks what she's doing here so late. She asks when her uncle was meant to be back, and he says that he'll be here tomorrow. He can tell that she was worried, while asking what's bothering her. She says the road here is dangerous, and who knows what the soldiers might pull this time. He says that she must be worried about him going around with just the con man. She says that she is, which causes him to laugh a lot. She wonders what he finds so funny. Seeing his track record, trust must be hard to come by for him. As Wongsum sighs, he draws his blade, saying that nothing ever goes smoothly. Buru tells her not to worry, as he may spout nothing but lies, but within their army, he was exceptional, and was known as the fight dummy. As he bounces off Varen, he dashes forward, instantly cutting the heads off of everybody he passes through. Buru tells her that among all of the Gali inspectors, he is by far the strongest. Varen is speechless, and Wongsum tells him it's time to go. Varen is still trying to process it, but is excited. They then hear a very crazy roar, and Varen says there's no way, asking why it's here now. As a giant foot enters, we see it's a twin-headed ogre. He begins to have a PTSD attack from the last ogre, and starts to panic. But tells himself to stay calm. While it may be the king of the land monsters, with Wongsum here it might actually be doable. When he turns, he sees him running into the woods, and realizes he's been had. Back to Jinchin, he says that he wants to end the meeting here today. A man knocks on the door, saying there's an urgent report. Jinchin tells him to speak, and the man says there's smoke rising from the northern Porter Tower. Jinchin asks if he knows anything else, and he says that something seems to have happened with the village they trade with. Jinchin asks how far it is, and the man tells him it's less than half a day on horseback. He says he can't ignore it, and they can decide if they're friend or foe on the spot, and they could keep the minimum people here for defense, while everyone else will march forward. It's a full mobilization order. Even Riesel is quickly running over, trying to figure out what happened, and as soon as he turns the corner, he sees all the soldiers ready for war already, and asks how they were so fast when it was just given. Jinchin pulls up on the horse, and stands before all of his troops while they all line up. Riesel says he's crossed every corner of the continent, but he's never seen such orderly troops, and that a unit radiating this much key rivals the Imperial Knights. Jinshin asks if they're ready, and Buru tells him to give him the word. Jinshin then tells Uru to take Riesel as well. Jinshin then says that while he may have seen the world, he wants to know if he's ever seen a battlefield. Riesel says that he has. Jinshin tells him to watch their war today, and tell them how they differ in terms of fighting tactics. Riesel says that the words were simple, but the force behind them was immense, and while he smells of blood, he's very calm, and every word he spoke was crystal clear. He bows to him, saying yes my lord. Jinshin then looks back towards the troops, telling them it's time to ride. Of course Uru and Buru start hyping everybody up, and as soon as the gate opens, they start marching out. At the nearby village, we see Alvin and his men have rounded up everybody except for the men who were capable of fighting, and the women who were too young. Alvin tells Tilluman to kill them all, as his men have their arrows ready. As the men have their bows ready, they draw back the strings, and shoot fire arrows towards the village, completely setting it ablaze. Alvin says that this village is too small. Tilluman says the prisoners say there's a bigger settlement nearby, and it sounds sizable. Alvin says if that's the case, then they might as well make use of their group, and it'll be a fun hunt, as they start making their way towards Jinshin's camp. Alvin then heads to the village with his men. Back to Wongsum and Varen, the twin-headed ogre is still walking through the forest trying to find them, and they somehow manage to dodge it as it walks straight past them. Wongsum asks why he deserves this, and Varen says that at least they should get off, and that's a relief. He then turns over wondering what he's hearing, as he sees a nasty little goblin thing. He says it seems they've entered monster territory, and Wongsum says in that case they better get out of here fast, but it hits him in the head with a rock, and Varen turns, and Wongsum gets pissed, saying that this thing is getting on his nerves. Varen tells him to wait, but Wongsum punts the thing like a football, asking what he was saying. Wongsum tells her that baby goblins are only raised in goblin villages, so he was going to say they should leave them alone, and get out of here, but after witnessing the first goblin space program the rest are too pissed to stand by. Wongsum says that he wished he stopped him. Meanwhile Jinshin and the rest finally arrive at the village, and see it completely burned to a crisp. He tells Hui that they'll rest here for a bit, and watch out for any ambushes. Riesel then tells him that judging by the insignia on the arrowhead, they are Baron Alvin's private soldiers. Jinshin says he sees, and he heard that he'd be coming to this area to capture farmers, asking if he has any idea why. Riesel says the real reason he came here was because the monsters here are ferocious, and numerous, so sending in an army would result in heavy losses. Since the city at the entrance to the mountains is a commercial city, they didn't need many slaves, but in this case it's to gather personnel for the war, and the more developed a city's commerce is, the more their wealthy trade duke help their children avoid conscription. So it's a common practice to buy serfs or slaves, and send them to the battlefield in their place along with a bribe, and it seems that they're planning to use the captured farmers as slaves. Jinshin says they are insane, asking if they really think they can win like that. Riesel tells him that the Haiyan kingdom probably doesn't care whether they win or lose. Jinshin asks what he's talking about, and he says that this country shares borders with two giant empires, and faces a maritime empire across the sea, so it's always been at the mercy of their checks, and the demands of their stronger side. So when they go to war, they've survived by providing both sides troops, so it doesn't matter who wins or loses, and that is the reality of this country. The Haiyan kingdom is a land that no one protects. Jinshin says that it's sad that they've already given up on being a nation. One of his men approaches him, saying that they found an enemy encampment, and there were about 20 cavalry, and 600 infantry. They saw about 250 people who seemed to have been kidnapped from here trapped in carts, and it looks like they're resting before moving on to another village. Jinshin says that's perfect, and that means tonight will be a long night though. At Alvin's camp, we see them torturing the villagers that they just kidnapped, and they're beating them over and over, and the men are laughing, having a great time, and some of the other men start undressing going towards the women, and one of them offers food and wine to the first one to step forward, but of course nobody does, so he walks over, and forcefully grabs onto one of them. Meanwhile the guards out front say that it sucks to be on guard duty instead of having fun with the women, and the other dude says that he feels that shit. The air then gets a little tense, and they wonder if maybe it's just because of the fog. The dude who was just saying that he feels him tells him that surely he's not scared of a wolf. Then an arrow flies into him, and his homeboy, taking both of them out. He then turns, seeing that the other ones are already dead too, and he hits the most zesty pose I've ever seen, wondering what's going on, before he catches one to the head too. He falls over as Hui and his men approach the front, saying it's time to send the signal. They pull out their pocket pigeons and toss them in the air, and Jinshin spots it from afar, saying that they've secured the escape route. Jinshin then tells Riesel to watch closely from now on, as this is how they battle. Uru and the archer squad ready their bows, and Uru smiles, telling all troops to fire as they shoot into the night sky. Meanwhile, the enemy are completely careless until they hear the sound of the arrows. One of the dudes looks up wondering what that is, but they're too far for him to see. He says that's definitely not a bird, but it's too late when he realizes they are arrows as he and his men start getting slaughtered one-sidedly. Half of the camp looks like it falls over, and the rest start taking to arms, running forward. And Alvin walks out asking what's going on. One of the soldiers bumps into him, but Tilluman runs over telling him not to worry, but it is dangerous to head back inside. Alvin looks over nervous telling him to get this under control quickly. Tilluman runs off telling the archers to prepare to return fire towards where the enemy came from. The spearmen need to prepare for an assault at the entrance, and he wonders what kind of bastards would do this. They begin to stand their ground. As the sound of horses galloping gets closer and closer, Tilluman wonders what kind of forces they'll have. Since they have a cavalry, he can tell they're not the settlers. Jinshin takes the lead, and draws back his bow, to which Tilluman sees, and smiles saying they are not a proper army, as firing a bow from horseback is a horrible idea, and he tells his men to draw their bows, and once they're enraged to fill them with holes. The men do exactly that as they draw back their bows, but Jinshin and his group unleash theirs first. Tilluman calls them foolish for firing from so far away, but as soon as he says that an arrow passes right by his face, and he has to matrix dodge underneath. His men haven't got the reflexes for that, and the unks start falling down left and right. Tilluman's in disbelief saying there's no way. Jinshin charges in, releasing yet another arrow as they're barraging Tilluman, causing him to stay there defensively. But every arrow that gets past him is killing his men. He yells telling his spearmen to lock the cavalry into place, so Jinshin orders his men to break through in a wedge formation. They start to charge, riding straight towards Tilluman. His horse has no fear as it runs straight into the spearmen, toppling over their front line. Tilluman asks his men what they're doing, saying they need to attack the horses. One of the men goes to stab the horse, but his spear bounces off the armor. He asks what the fuck just happened because the horses are made entirely of iron. They then start to paint an image of Jinshin based on fear, calling him and his army a group of devils. He screams before the horse stomps his skull into the floor as they're getting completely overwhelmed. Jinshin tells his men to pierce right through them, and turns telling Buru to get ready. Buru says he can count on him, and Jinshin nods. Before they charge back in, he yells saying they are here to save the settlers. They ride through the two groups of spearmen they separated. One of the men sees this getting excited saying that now there's a chance the cavalry is gone, but Buru wonders why he's so happy telling his men to charge in. We see the tower shields walking up first. They begin charging in, the enemy spearmen try to block them, but they're getting overwhelmed with pure raw strength. As the shield dudes are single-handedly pushing them back, men slip in between the cracks of the shields while also cracking the skulls of the enemies, annihilating them with ease. One of the soldiers screams thrusting forward, but the normal soldier doesn't even try blocking it because he knows his boy got his back. As the spearmen thrust forward killing the guy, and his final thoughts are him just wondering who the hell they are. The one-sided slaughter continues as Alvin exits his tent, and watches it. He says judging by their armor they aren't the Imperial Army, but he has no idea who they are. Tilluman runs saying that they need to retreat immediately to the rear. Alvin says he'll tear them to pieces himself. When he returns to his domain, he will lead the kingdom's army, and come back for him. Another man then runs over. Then Tilluman quickly asks if the escape route is secured. He says about that, there's a problem. Meanwhile in the camp, we see a bunch of the settlers asking how this happened as they are witnessing the soldiers running for their lives. As Hui and his group are on foot slowly approaching from behind the people fleeing while Jinshin's group cuts them off. Hui says he's glad that Jinshin arrived, and Jinshin tells him good work, also to secure the cart, as the cavalry will return with him. One of the men realizes what's going on, and crouches down grabbing a torch saying he can't die like this. He says it's all because of the settlers, so they can all die together. The settlers begin screaming as Hui realizes that he can't let him close the gap or else they'll burn alive. The soldier with a torch yells, saying they are going to die burning in agony. As he begins to run in, Hui stretches out his hand, and casts a spell. As he starts to cast his spell, his eyes start to glow a bright orange as the flames warp towards the enemy, and set him ablaze, burning him alive on the spot. To the point that he turns into a straight skeleton. The settlers are completely speechless, and start tweaking, saying he is a wizard. Eventually, Jinshin and his men round up whoever is left in the camp, leaving behind a sea of corpses. Uru smiles, and Tilluman says that out of 600 soldiers, only 100 survive the charge. Alvin then asks if they have any idea who he is, as he is a noble. The men don't reply, to which Alvin thinks that it's because they don't want to treat him carelessly, so he'll press them while he holds the upper hand. He tells them if they know the laws of war, they'd never treat him this way, asking where their commander is. They start to shift sideways until Jinshin appears. Alvin wonders if he's the one in command. As Jinshin gets closer, he asks him, introducing himself. Jinshin stares down at Alvin, while Alvin yells asking if he's ignoring him. Jinshin then calls for the con man, but Buru says that he hasn't returned from the village. Jinshin then tells Riesel to give him the item. Riesel says okay, but he must speak the activation phrase to cast the magic. Jinshin puts it on, and then says activation phrase. Word for word. Riesel's surprised, wondering if he's stupid. Jinshin then asks Alvin if he can understand him, but Riesel says that's not the activation phrase. Jinshin's confused, and he says that's what he told him to say. Riesel then tells him to repeat after him, saying interpretation. Jinshin then tries, in some really broken English. Alvin continues watching confused, and Tilluman says that the battle seems decided, asking if he can take over from here. Alvin asks if he has a better plan, and then Tilluman starts whispering some sweet nothings into his ear, until he smiles because he likes that freaky shit he's hearing. Riesel gets right into Jinshin's face, saying that he must pronounce it clearly, one syllable at a time. Jinshin then says, interpretation, but really slowly. The ring starts glowing, and Riesel claps super excitedly, saying that it worked. Jinshin asks Alvin if he can hear him, and Alvin says that he can. Jinshin then says that's good, and Tilluman steps up introducing himself. Jinshin then does the exact same, saying that he is from the Gali Empire. Tilluman repeats the empire's name, and Jinshin says that's correct. Tilluman says there's no country called Gali on this continent, yet he dares to call it an empire. He wonders what's the deal with these people. Jinshin asks if they wish to continue, but Tilluman says the outcome of the battle has already been decided, but he has one request. He challenges Jinshin to a one-on-one duel. If he wins, he wants him to withdraw peacefully. Jinshin says the duel is interesting, and he accepts as a warrior, that he doesn't take any challenge. Tilluman thanks him. Alvin says as expected, the duel was agreed upon, and that Tilluman was a knight renowned even within the kingdom. If they take their leader hostage, they can turn the tide. Jinshin hops off the whip, and he walks through Tilluman's soldiers straight towards him. Tilluman draws his blade, and starts powering up as he coats it in aura. Riesel asks why someone of a royal guard caliber would be here. Tilluman asks Jinshin if he's prepared, and Jinshin tells him to come forward already. Riesel yells, telling him that he's an aura user, and he has to dodge this. But Tilluman charges in, saying that it's too late, and he swings down towards his head. Jinshin watches the blade's path, and swings upward, shattering Tilluman's blade, sending it flying into the air. It almost stabs Alvin, but Tilluman starts to have cold sweats, and his heart starts racing. He asks how, saying that it's like his sword is radiating aura without even channeling it. Jinshin looks down at Tilluman, telling him that he's pathetic. Alvin runs over, asking Tilluman what he is doing. When he pulls on Tilluman's neck, he realizes something. As blood starts to form in between Tilluman's eyes, his body cleaves in two as he splits straight down the middle, soaking Alvin in blood. Alvin drops down onto the floor in absolute horror, then slowly starts to look up at Jinshin, seeing the same image of a devil as the men did. Jinshin then asks if they are done now, and glares down at him. Alvin begins to piss his pants. Riesel says though invisible, the surge of mana felt in that instant far exceeded mere aura. Uru laughs, saying that even in this backwater, there are fools leaking mana everywhere. I think they might have meant ki, but just going with what the translation says. He, and all of his men laugh. Jinshin then tells his boys that they are leaving, and they shout to acknowledge they heard him. Riesel though says that he's been treated like a complete fool, and he wonders just what kind of place the Gali Empire truly is. As they are heading back to the camp with the settlers behind them, Riesel says that no matter how much he thinks about it, he can't understand. He knows most of the continent's information better than anyone, and it doesn't make sense that he wouldn't know of a group with this much military power. Uru asks what he is doing, and he says that there is something he would like to ask him. Asking him where they came from, Uru says he already told him that he came from Gali. Riesel stares at him, wondering if he is stupid too, and asking him where Gali is located. He says that they came by boat, and the direction. As he starts thinking about it, he says that they just have to sail from the lake of their encampment for about 3 days. Riesel gets excited, but then thinks about it, saying that it's a lake, and there is nowhere else to go, and that he must be dumber than an orc. He says as he knows there is no way out from the lake, but how can he say that they will reach a place called Gali by traveling 3 days? Uru tells him it's the truth. While they are pushing through the storm, he starts explaining the story to him. Riesel says to think that the place they arrived at after breaking head-on through the wall of water was the lake in the mountain range. He then thinks about it, and says he might have an idea what happened. Back at the encampment, the soldiers yell, telling everybody that the great lion Jinshin is back, so open the gate. They do so. But then we hear the con man screaming his name as loud as he can, saying it's a disaster. He kneels before him, saying that the enemies have dispatched troops from the city with the intent to capture the settlers, and they must quickly gather their forces, and prepare for their attack. Jinshin stares down at him. And while Wongsum hesitates for a second, he says they have no time for this. And then he ran without a day's rest to report this. Jinshin looks down at him again, and then just walks away. Wongsum is confused, and Buru tells him that he's beating a dead horse. Wongsum asks what he means, and Buru says it once more that they're on their way back from catching and killing them all, and that he should go change his clothes, asking if he's some kind of beggar. As they leave, both him and Varen kneeling there. A little later, after he cleaned up, Wongsum is explaining it all to Jinshin, saying for now, with the sole intention of reporting this, he cut down all the trackers. Jinshin asks what happened next, and Wongsum tells him that suddenly a giant two-headed monster started chasing him. Jinshin asks what happened next, and Wongsum says of course, because he's so lightning fast with his feet. What he saw next was even crazier. Thousands of green bastards were trying to kill him. Jinshin asks what happens next. Then Wongsum starts changing his story, saying that maybe there were only 100. Jinshin asks what happened next, and he changes it to dozens. Jinshin asks once more what happens next, and Wongsum struggles to answer. Jinshin says that he abandoned everything he bought with the money. They scraped together for months, and came back alone. Wongsum panics, and starts scratching his head, saying that it's all because of some bastard named Alvin. Jinshin recognizes it, telling Hui to go bring the piss pants over here. Hui asks why, and Jinshin says that he needs to ask him a question. As they bring in Captain Piss Pants, he says that they can't do this to a noble man at the kingdom. We see that he's wearing the ring of interpretation. He says according to the international law, a noble man must be given treatment corresponding to a situation even if captured. Jinshin asks Riesel if he's right, and Riesel says that he is. Jinshin stares at him for a second, saying that he will treat him accordingly. Alvin tells him that if he sends him back now, he will give them 1,000 gold. In addition to that, he will propose to the king that they be given autonomy over this region. Jinshin says they do need a place to settle down comfortably, and Alvin says that seeing as they all seem to have no affiliation, he's willing to take them in as subordinates. Uru and Uru start yelling at him, saying they're going to make him piss his pants again, calling him a little piss baby. Jinshin tells them both to not be rude to the Baron, and they instantly listen to his orders but are still glaring at him. Jinshin asks if he really would take them in. Alvin says he'll give them the best treatment. Then Jinshin thinks about it. Alvin smiles, saying that if he plays this right, he might even be able to get some elite soldiers on his hands. Jinshin says he apologizes for the hardships he has endured, telling his men to release his bonds. They do so, and Alvin says that if he can gain a talent such as himself, he can endure even greater hardships than this. That is the virtue of a lord. Jinshin says that he's grateful for his magnanimity, but there is one thing that concerns him. Alvin asks what it is, and Jinshin walks forward, saying that he is concerned that his subordinates will clash with the existing soldiers of his estate. Alvin tells them not to worry because the estate only has a security force right now. He manages them directly, so how would a problem arise? Jinshin says also if this number of troops suddenly grows, food will also be a bit of a problem. Alvin says that his mansion has enough provision prepared to maintain these troops for over half a year. Jinshin says that he's glad to hear all this, telling him to go and rest, and tells his men to take the ring off his neck. They do so, and he tells his men to escort him to the place where only the settlers and farmers are at. They say understood, and start guiding Alvin away. Riesel tells him that he might be beaten to death there, and Jinshin says if that happens it's just his fate, and that they will march the day after tomorrow, so be ready. Riesel asks where they are going, and why. Jinshin says that Liar needs to bring back the principal and interest for the card he lost. Hui smiles, but so do Buru and Uru. He puts on a villainous grin, saying that now when the bastards have stayed as a few troops is the perfect chance, and that's the fun of being at war. He's getting to pillage. Later, We see Alvin yelling, calling them bastards, and asking what the meaning of this is as he will become their lord. He yells telling them this has to be a mistake, and to open it now. He starts banging on the gate asking how are these idiots handling things. He then spots something as all the settlers and farmers that he had locked up are all glaring at him. He calls them lowly creatures, and points to one of them telling him to bring him water. The guy stares at him as Alvin sighs. He walks over, and kicks him in the chest causing him to fall to the floor. He starts stomping him calling him trash. The man begins to bleed, and begs that he spares him. Another one starts to run at him, but his boy holds him back saying that soldier earlier said he'd kill anyone who touched Alvin. The dude's furious recalling how he watched his loved ones get slaughtered by Alvin's men. Yet once more he is watching Alvin act like a tyrant without any mercy, and he says that surely they're all frustrated. The men realize that they are, and Alvin glares at them trying to put them back in their place. He then sighs again. As the dude from earlier walks up, Alvin asks what he wants asking how dare he glares at him. He then punches him straight in the face sending him flying backwards into the cage, and he hits his head. He slumps over, and begins bleeding before he realizes he's in severe danger, and starts screaming for the guards. The man walks up behind him, and Alvin says that he's sorry so hopefully he'll let him explain. The man says he doesn't need apologies, and words, and he can atone with his death. He then starts beating him to death. The next day we see all the prisoners kneeling before Jinshin, and the rest. Their speech is in the main perpetrator Hawk, and is tied up with Alvin's corpse on the ground below them. Jinshin asks Hawk why he killed him, and Hawk doesn't answer until one of the guards grabs him by the back of the head, and slams him into the ground, and starts stomping him. Jinshin asks again, and Hawk asks if he was meant to stand by, and watch his enemy. Jinshin smiles saying that revenge is a right given to humans asking if he's a human. Hawk asks what he's talking about, and Jinshin says that vermin can't speak of revenge. Besides him who else laid hands on Alvin? Hawk tells him that he did it alone. Jinshin then looks at the soldier, and nods his head as they pick up Hawk, and carry him away. Buru then follows as the rest worry about what will happen to them. Jinshin says that one noble's life equals 10 vermin. Now if just 9 more of them volunteered to die he'll use the rest as slaves. All of the men start yelling saying that they'll gladly sacrifice themselves, and then they start to feel an overwhelming pressure, and stop talking as Jinshin walks towards them. He says that if just 9 more of them sacrifice themselves he guarantees everyone else is asking if no one else will do it. A man then stands up asking if he can spare them all just for taking his life. His wife and son scream for him, but Jinshin says 8 more to go, and the men carry him as well. He says that even if the remaining number isn't filled he'll spare his family. Jinshin says he guarantees it telling him 8 more to come out. We see them put the men on the chopping block as Buru walks over with his axe telling him to hold on tight. The man closes his eyes, and accepts death as we hear the sound of the axe swing down. The rest are horrified, and one of them, the dude who got kicked by Alvin, says that if he goes out that'll be 7. Jinshin nods, and then we hear the axe once more. This continues for 6, 5, and 4. Every single time the sound of the axe going off is heard. Jinshin says they're 4 short, but nobody wants to step up. Jinshin tells Hui that they should provide homes and livelihoods for the families of the 6 who sacrifice themselves so they will become his people. The rest can be locked up and used as slaves, and he calls them trash. Elsewhere at the camp we see Hawk laying down, and Varen asks if he's awake. Hawk asks how he is here, and Varen says it's a long story, and they can talk after he's recovered. Hawk just asks how he's alive. Varen tells him it was only a test. Hawk asks what kind of test that is, and Varen tells him that he and the 5 other residents who volunteered to sacrifice themselves will live as citizens with their families, and the rest will live as slaves. Hawk says it's crazy, and that pain felt like death. He was certain he was dying. As we see they all have bloody asses. Varen laughs saying that it seems he had no intention of killing them since he was testing whether they had will or not. However, it had to seem real, so they made Buru do it. He asks if he's talking about that giant axe-wielding dwarf, and Varen says that's right. He administered acupuncture to their ass. As Buru starts cleaning the hilt of his axe, Wongsum says that it is filthy. Buru asks if he wants to know why he did it, and Wongsum says of course. Buru says there's nothing he can't tell him. Wongsum asks why, then Buru says it's his turn to try his ass. Wongsum begins to run, but Buru grabs him by the collar. As Wongsum's life flashes before his eyes, Buru grins, and we hear him screaming. Bro got some ditty in him. Meanwhile, Everybody starts farming as Buru is taking a seat with Sarah. She says that she has a question wondering why they are slaves. He says that when the general first took them all in, he said that they will only be accepted if they can wield a sword, and if one cannot sacrifice oneself, then it will be the same when the enemy attacks later. For humans, taking up a sword is the most basic thing, which means it is the most important thing of all. He once asked the great envoy a similar question, as we get a flashback to when they were a little younger. Jinshin told him that survival is something anyone can achieve, but freedom is not something everyone can enjoy. Buru says that's difficult. Then Jinshin tells him to look at the pigs locked in their pens, give them food, and they repeat the same behavior until the day they die. But what about the wild boars in the forest? When you try to catch them they resist to survive, yet it's not merely for survival. If you capture them, and lock them in a pen, what do? Buru said they ram their head against the fence. Jinshin says perfect, asking why, saying it's because they know freedom. Human beasts do everything they can for freedom, and long ago humans lived freely without nations or borders, following the teachings of the Hanan, who said benefit all of humankind. But it did not last. When traders began to grow greedy, the bloody history began. To gain their own prosperity they enslaved, and suppressed the freedom of others, which is why one must always remember the reason for drawing a sword. Those without purpose can never become strong. To protect freedom one must draw their sword, and to draw the sword one must understand freedom. That's the difference between the weight of a sword wielded by one who knows freedom, and the sword of one who does not. And they should take their swords up together for Golly's free will. The flashback ends, and Buru says that they take up swords to protect, and if they are weak they can't protect anything. The nearby farmers and soldiers are in awe upon hearing this, and he pats Sarah's head saying he'll protect her. She laughs, saying that's her favorite thing to hear. 3 days later at night everybody's heading out to Alvin's place. And Riesel says after crossing a week's distance in only 3 days, yet not showing a hint of exhaustion. That was one thing if it were the cavalry, but how are the archers who always travel on foot riding so skillfully? Uru calls out to Riesel saying that Jinshin wants to talk to him. He guides him over. Riesel's in admiration of the sight of his back. Jinshin says this place is not the same as they know, and he must have already realized they are not the same as him. Riesel says that he has, and Jinshin says that the stars are in different shapes, and the moon is different too, as well as the language. Riesel says though his magic skills are lacking more than any wizard, he prides himself on having more knowledge. Jinshin looks back at him as Riesel says not once in this world has he heard of an empire named Golly. Jinshin asks if there is a Tang Empire, to which Riesel says there isn't. Jinshin asks if he knows any other nations, and starts listing out the older names for the Asian countries, and Riesel says he's never seen or heard of them. There's silence for a minute, and Jinshin asks where they are now, and where they have come to. Riesel tells him that this is the continent of Haiyan, and it seems that his lord has crossed the wall of dimensions. In other words, he's crossed into an entirely different world. 10,000 years ago the ancient dragon Berthasair traveled across the world, and established coordinates across all lands. There exists a magic called warp which allows one to move through space using coordinates. However, the empire he's spoken of does not exist in any of those coordinates, so he came to the conclusion that it must be another dimension. Jinshin asks what a dragon is, and why they believe in something just because it supposedly did things. Riesel explains to him that dragons are from a great race, and that's just what they're called, as dragons. Jinshin asks if they are gods, but Riesel says not exactly. Here on Earth though no nation or army can challenge them. Jinshin says that's funny, and Riesel asks what he's talking about. Jinshin says that even if their appearance is a little different, dragons are still dragons, and it's ridiculous that a world like this is ruled by creatures like them. Riesel wonders what he's talking about, and then Jinshin points at the crest on his armor, asking him if he knows what this is. Riesel asks what it's meant to symbolize, but he knows it's a bird with 3 legs. Jinshin says that the mark living on their hearts is a divine beast called Samjok-o, and it feeds on dragons. Riesel looks shocked by this, and Jinshin puts his hand on his shoulder, saying that there's no need to fear some strange-looking lizard, and to remember that. Riesel sits there in pure silence as he watches Jinshin walk into the woods heading back towards his men and his horse, and he smiles, saying that a place they can no longer return to means that he doesn't need to worry about the empire there anymore. He looks up at the moon, saying that from now on this is where he must live. His men start running on foot, getting closer to Alvin's territory. They get right up to the wall, and use their newfound superhuman abilities to scale it in an instant. They quickly pull up their weapons as we see Wongsum taking the charge, heading towards the guards who were just complaining about how much work they've been doing. His boy then stops talking mid-sentence, and he turns asking if he's okay, But he sees him getting some crazy back shots. Riesel then covers his mouth, telling him not to say a word, asking how many guards there are on duty, and if he answers sincerely he'll do whatever he asks. The man nods his head, and says that there are 12 in total, and 5 more standby units in the building below the wall. Wongsum asks what he wants, and the man begs for his life. Wongsum asks if that's all, and the man hesitates for a second, saying if possible he wants some money to settle somewhere. Wongsum asks if that's really all he wants. The man then asks for maybe a horse, and some extra money. Wongsum says sure, and the dude goes to thank him before Wongsum stabs him in the chest. The man asks why, saying that he said he'd allow it. Wongsum says he did, and he's still listening so he can say more, as he'll allow whatever he wants. The dude says that he's nothing but a con man before dying. As he falls to the floor, Wongsum says that he's tired of hearing that, but all the men as well say that he's definitely a con man. They start to light a signal, and Uru tells Jinshin that means it's time. Jinshin pulls the rein on his horse, telling them all to move swiftly, and quietly, while only hitting Alvin's mansion. Later they continue killing the guards on top of the wall, and raise the gates so Jinshin, and the rest can ride in. Wongsum greets them, and bows. Jinshin says they'll leave this place to them, and seize the other castle gates. They say yes, and start running off. Jinshin says each squad will disperse, and approach the destination slowly. Any patrolling soldiers are to be killed on sight, no questions asked. The men all say yes, and he tells them once they reach the destination to strike immediately when the signal arrow sounds. They split off. As Jinshin, and his cavalry are behind him, he looks upwards towards Alvin's mansion, telling them it's time to advance. Riesel, and the rest are setting up camp outside, and he's thinking about something. We get a flashback to Jinshin saying he will assign some soldiers to him so to stay here until the battle is over. Riesel asks what he's meant to do, and Jinshin says he's going to choose. Riesel asks what that means, and Jinshin says they're going to raid the home of Alvin, but when they raid it there will be lots of goods. He questions who would know better about the value of the items inside, himself, or Riesel. Riesel says of course he would, asking if that's all. Jinshin says he would also know more about the books there. In surviving this place they need those books, and maps, and his mission is to find them. We get some pretty cool symbolism of Jinshin in the fire, which may mean he might consume the lands. We'll see what it means later on. The signal starts going off, and one of the men tells Riesel it's time. Riesel says that for him to use the sound of an arrow as a signal truly is crazy. He then realizes something, saying they have to get to the castle quickly. One of the men asks what he's talking about, and he says it was his mistake. This place is far from the capital, so of course there would be a communication mage dispatched here, and that he didn't think that. The man tells him not to worry, as they will block the beacon tower, and any place they might send a messenger from first. Riesel says this is frustrating as it's magic communication. The dude asks what he's talking about, and Riesel rides off, leaving the rest before they can even mount up. He says they need to stop them before the message reaches the kingdom, otherwise no one will survive, and he desperately rides forward. At the estate, Jinshin and his men are barging through the gate as spearmen are prepared to stop them. Jinshin and the rest don't even hesitate, charging straight forward. He makes his own path for his men, and they start trampling over the soldiers. Jinshin yells, saying not to let a single one of them escape, and to kill anyone who resists. They continue brute forcing their way forward, and even the horse is getting some kills. One of the men starts to run away, asking where the hell a cavalry like this came from. Jinshin tells Uru to take control of the house, and he says got it, telling some men to follow him. He hops off his mount, and walks inside, kicking the door open. He and the rest walk forward, and he says that if they let even one person escape they'll all have to answer to him. They start splitting up, searching for clues, and he heads down some stairs until he notices a door. He's even more surprised that there's more steps going down. They start walking, and he tells his men to wait as he senses something. Telling them to wait here, and he puts his ear up to the wall, he hears somebody asking why they're struggling so much. He draws his bow, and continues to creep down the stairs, and he turns the hallway like he's going to defuse the bomb. This dude looks like he is wearing someone else's skin. He looks over at him, asking who's there before he gets shot in the neck. Uru quickly runs over, and looks inside, telling his men to bring a light. They do so, and he opens the gate. As he points the arrow at the skinwalker, he pans across the room, seeing a woman tied up. Her condition doesn't look that good. Uru says she's pretty enough to make a man ache. Now that he gets a better look at her, he's surprised as her skin is white as snow, and her ears are pointed, and he says that based on her appearance she's a fairy, and he starts bowing towards her. We see a little before this when the skinwalker was torturing her, telling her to stop resisting. He then heard footsteps, and the sound of someone walking down the stairs, and he asked who was there before the arrow flew in, sticking him to the wall. She says that they finally came. When she opens her eyes, what she sees is Uru. She wonders why there's a dwarf with humans, but is more surprised to see that he's got a bow instead of an axe. That is when Uru, and the rest saw her ears and skin, then started bowing, calling her a fairy. She wonders why the proud clan of Titan is bowing to her, asking if this is a dream. Later, back to the castle. Jinshin's men have completely taken it over, and have the ones who surrendered kneeling on the ground. One of the men looks over at Jinshin, and as one of his men walks over, saying that they have cut down everyone who appears to be Alvin's family. The soldiers are surprised that he killed a noble family without mercy, saying it's unthinkable from mere bandits, and he wonders who they are. Jinshin says to gather all their bodies. He turns around, as Riesel runs in yelling out for him. He gets off his horse, and Jinshin says that he hasn't even sent a signal yet. Riesel tells him that he must stop the communication mage. Jinshin asks what that is, and Riesel says that he has no time to explain, so he'll do it later, but if he asks Alvin's family retainers he can find them. He then sees their heads, and starts freaking out. Jinshin says they didn't let a single one escape, at least from what he was told. Riesel realizes that he probably worried for no reason. As Uru starts running out yelling for him. Jinshin wonders what's up, and we see him carrying the elf. Uru tells him that he saved the fairy. Jinshin asks what he means by a fairy, but says that it's definitely not a human on his back. Uru says of course not, asking how a fairy and a human could be the same. Riesel goes to tell him that it's not a fairy, but Jinshin says to wait as he can sense the energy gathering in one of the towers. Riesel yells no. Jinshin asks why he came here again, saying he could have just sent the soldiers. Riesel tells him that it's communication magic, and it's like a beacon, which will instantly inform the capital of the news here, and judging by the mana it's too late to go catch him now. Jinshin stares at him, and as he continues, he thinks about it. Telling Uru to do his job, Uru sets down the elf very gently, leaving her confused. He draws back his bow, and aims to hit up the mage. Riesel tells him that it's impossible. At this distance even for an elf it's difficult to reach him, and so they must run immediately. Uru releases the arrow, and it sounds like an anti-tank rifle going off. It flies up, and we see a giant explosion of mana. The mage falls out of the tower, and Riesel and the elf are both shocked. Riesel says the mana has vanished, but the elf is more surprised that there is an arrow so fast that even she and elf couldn't see. Later the men start taking out all the spoils of war, and lining it up. Uru tells them they have to move faster than this, but spots a man carrying out some alchemy stuff, and asks what this is doing here, and if they really believe in this. He then hears Riesel screaming, and barges into the room asking what's wrong. Riesel says that the Mandragora extract is ruined, crying about how this is worth so much yet it was dropped. Uru asks what that is. Riesel is pissed, telling them all to get out of here, as he'll handle this place himself, and he forces them outside. He cries once more over the Mandragora, and on the outside the boys just wonder what's wrong with them. Eventually they get out all the valuables, but Uru takes a look around the hallway saying that they need to bring the armor too. The man asks why, and Uru says that they're going to melt them down, and make arrows since they're short on iron. The dude says that sure is smart, and they continue. Jinshin then enters saying that they're going to be short on wagons. Meaning taking this back might be a little rough, and so they should take 40 troops, and distribute the remaining grain to the citizens here, and focus on those who look poor. For the armor to crush them, and make them flat before loading them. The men start breaking them into pieces, and the soldiers say that that is worth decades of living expenses. They successfully break them all up. From the garden nearby the dirt begins to move as a hand sticks out of it. The man then hops up out of the ground saying this was a successful infiltration, and only to be greeted by Jinshin and everybody else. He stands there confused, and before introducing himself as Gerard of the Lightning, and asking who will attack first. Jinshin and the rest still kind of stare at him, and the dude wonders what's going on. Jinshin tells his men to deal with them, and Gerard sighs saying that even mercenaries bow their heads when they hear his name, and yet for such poor treatment they must be looking down on the continent's greatest treasure hunter, and he is one of the 10 great swordsmen. Arrows then fly by outlining his entire body, and even grazing his face, and he looks down at the blood, and then back up at the men, and once more down at the arrows, and drops his sword saying that he surrenders. They quickly tie him up. As Gerard says that they have black hair, and black eyes, and all of his travels across the continent this is the first time he's ever seen attire and features like theirs. He spots something as they're smashing the armor to pieces. He's surprised, and calling them lunatics, asking if they know how much that's worth. Jinshin calls him a grave robber, and Gerard tells him he's a treasure hunter. It's a legitimate profession that explores dungeons. Jinshin says okay, and call him a grave robber again, and asking if the armor is that expensive. He says hell yes it is, and just one of those could feed a family for 10 years. It is a mail with foolish patterns, and decorative functions that cannot compare to standard mail. And ones like that are very expensive. The men continue beating, and he screams begging that they stop. Jinshin tells them to wait for a moment, but Uru tells them not to worry as since the soldiers were late he already finished the rest himself. Jinshin debates sending him back to the other world. Gerard starts to feel defeated, saying that was his living expenses. As a treasure hunter he usually makes money by running dungeons, but during times of war he lays low, and earns living expenses with small jobs. He heard the news that Alvin was leading his troops to the mountains, and for him the greatest treasure hunter robbing an empty house is child's play. But an unexpected situation occurred, and for a swords master like him escaping is not difficult. The reason he surrendered is because of his curiosity. So he's going to dig up every detail about the identity of these weird humans. Jinshin then hits him in the back of the head, and Gerard yells asking why he did that. Jinshin tells him to watch his tongue, and speak of important matters like earlier beforehand. Gerard asks why he has to tell him that, and says he'll endure it until his curiosity is satisfied, but he managed to get one piece of info. Jinshin holds grudges over trivial things. Later Riesel tells him that he thought well, because after all what they need right now is supplies, and iron not money. In times of war the value of money drops, and the country scrapes up every bit of iron to offer to the empire, so it's better to turn it into scrap iron, and it's more profitable to make dwarf-made armor with this, and sell it. Jinshin thinks about it saying that he sees, and the sun will rise soon so it's time for them to head back. All throughout the village there are bags left from the slums, and the commoners are surprised asking who did this. A man then runs over saying that they've got big trouble as the mansion has been completely destroyed, and there are only corpses. The commoners ask each other what's going on, and one of them says that he doesn't know but it's good Alvin is gone but it means another guy just like him will take his place. The dude looks down at the bags of food, and says that it's already good they've got the grain to survive the winter. The dude says that's true, and they don't know who did this. They are just grateful for it, and as are all the other villagers. As they continue heading back the carriage bumps into a rock causing Gerard to hit his ass a couple times on the wood, and he starts screaming freaking out. Jinshin tells them to halt as Gerard says that this wagon is torture. They hop out the wagon looking at the wheels, and we see that it's broken. They start flaming the guy who made it. And I believe this is the captain from a while back telling him to go report to the general. As the guy runs off Gerard watches it all wondering what to do. The direction they're going is the notoriously dangerous mountains, and the cavalry are all wearing full body scale mail that comes down to their ankles. Even the horses are wrapped in it. They also have a very strange mana, and for him it's hard to gauge their skills. One wrong move, and escaping might be difficult. He then thinks about it wondering why he's even worrying in the first place, and sits up. One of the men tells him to sit put, but he smiles before hopping out the side of the cage, and breaks free from his restraints. One of the soldiers say that the prisoner has escaped as Gerard lands on his feet. The men draw their bows, but Gerard smirks, and dodges their shots. He starts running forward, kicking the carriage man in the face, and reaches into his bag pulling out a bracelet, and uses the magic for interpretation. One of the men tells him to stop, and the rest subdues him. Before he messes with their supplies Gerard smiles, and the dude says to grab anything that could be a weapon away from him. Gerard then pulls out his weapon saying that he has a sword right here. They're just confused how a sword that big came out of a tiny bag, and he hops off saying that it's time for him to try escaping. If you've watched till the end comment, ham, to let me know. Subscribe for more videos like this, leave a like or a comment to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.